You're listening to The Starting Zone, a podcast about World of Warcraft and the people who play it. And now, here are your hosts.
Well, hello and welcome to The Starting Zone, the podcast about World of Warcraft and people who play it. Today is September 30th, and my name is Spencer Downey. Thank you so much for listening and subscribing to the podcast. I'm joined today, as always, by my co-host, Jason Lucas. Jason, how are you doing on this fine Monday?
Spencer, hello. I am doing quite well. It is September 30th. October is almost upon us.
True. War Within launched in August. It's almost October. We're just flying by here, but it's been a big week, obviously, for the game with the race wrapping up and everything. Glad to see that it wrapped up, the second weekend. I feel like that's the sweet spot where the players all want it to be, and we can have a different conversation about what that means. But I sort of feel like Blizzard has been holding their breath a little bit, waiting for the race to be done to, do some tuning changes and stuff. And it is Monday afternoon as we record this, so we don't have any info. Like, a lot of times Monday night blogs come out about tuning changes and stuff. So, we won't be able to cover that today, but keep an eye out. I wouldn't be surprised if we see some stuff start getting dialed in a little bit more now that it's not mega disruptive to the race, right? And it might be this week, might be next week, but I think we have plenty of changes to talk about, but I think there'll be more incoming as well. I'd want to highlight that a lot of the teams I'm talking to right now that are 4 of 8 Mythic are hitting Ovanax and just going, this is silly. Like, you basically have to bring in a particular group comp to meet the checks that you need to check to be able to actually kill this boss. Please nerf this boss. Now the race is over, please nerf this boss. Because I think it was the numbers the last time I checked them, which was a few days ago or a couple days ago, was there was like 8 teams or something that had gotten past Ovanax and sort of gotten through the bosses and were, lining up at Queen. And then there was like 400 or 600 teams. And it's more than that now, because I know 2 or 3 other teams that have, since let's check those numbers, had gotten to Ovanax and just couldn't get past Ovanax. And you're like, okay, if you have a wall that's large enough that like only a few teams who did this specific thing, like less than 20 have kind of gotten through and are progressing along, and then the bulk majority, this massive number, are hitting this wall and not being able to go any farther because they aren't doing the specific things you need to kill the boss. It's a poorly designed, poorly tuned boss and needs to get adjusted. So I'm hoping those things happen either overnight tonight or later in the week. I wouldn't be surprised if we saw Thursday hotfixes this week as well. I think we are now hitting that point where we should be seeing stuff brought in much farther down towards the average Mythic rating team as opposed to the elite Mythic rating team that is going in there and facing off against this stuff. So I would expect teams that were stuck on Ovanax last week to be stuck on Silken Court later next week kind of thing, or later this week. Should be what we start seeing. So I want that pacing to pick up a bunch, because you're right. I mean, we're now, we've got what? We have patch coming in November, right? And
probably late October, yeah.
Yeah, new
4 or 5 weeks out, I would say.
Right, and I think new raid patch will probably be in January, December.
Maybe. I think they'll probably wait until 2025, and so probably like
January.
I would think maybe even a little bit farther out than that, because remember, we will have the anniversary event that will that's going to go on for at least 2 months, so that'll probably carry us into January, and that will include the redone Blackwing Lair raid. So there'll be new stuff to do. So Nerebar can have a bit of a shorter shelf life, though, I think, and in terms of like keeping the tuning bar high, because we will have distractions, and then we'll be into end of year holiday time stuff, and then we can ramp back up into tier 2 of this expansion after New Year would be my thinking.
Yeah, I guess I'm just trying to think about their accelerated timeline for getting content out. So I was just trying to think of where that might land for some of this stuff. But You're right. If we're not going to see the next raid tier until after the entire anniversary event wraps, like that anniversary event's not going to tie from one patch into the next, then we're definitely farther out, because that thing runs 3 months. So we'd be looking at February at the earliest then, if that's the case. So, yeah. All right. Anyways,
This past week in World of Warcraft, let's talk about that before we hop into what's going on this week, because we do have some fun stuff to talk about this week as well. Man, I have been pretty busy. I guess I last left off that we were looking at doing Queen and then some mythic bosses. We got Queen, so we cleared Heroic last week. And then we went last Monday, and then we got Ulgrax and got some time in on Blood, whatever, the big Blood dude, second boss. And the boss we can never remember the name of because we didn't remember it last week either, and I didn't look it up since then, so it's just not there. But yes, we got some time in on that on Mythic. We were having some trouble with some of the splits for our groups in the upstairs, downstairs, whatever you want to call it, phase, where you get hit by the frontal cleave and go to a different realm, with having basically the one of the ads you have to interrupt, not interrupt, one of the ads you have to kill the little ads on that shields the boss, spawns on the opposite side of the room. And so when you have that plus cutter beams that are rotating, getting people over to that spot to get that ad while also getting the other ads down in time was proving to be a bit of a challenge for our team. So that held us up on that boss, although we were really hoping we'd kill it, so that's a problem. And then last night, we easily cleared through Heroic again. Well, we did last 4 bosses on normal to get people tier tokens, and then did all of Heroic and got to Queen with an hour and 20 minutes left, which was looking really good for, hey, we'll get Mythic Prog in tonight. But hit Queen and just hit a wall. We had a bunch of new people that were in. We had a 30-person Heroic raid versus our 23 that we had last week. And it just wasn't happening. There were people who weren't going to the right, what are they called? Frothing at the beginning, so that we ended up with 3 stacks of the debuff as opposed to 2 stacks of the debuff, which meant there was a much larger raid AoE that would go off, and we take a lot more damage. We also had people that were just making mistakes, standing in things they shouldn't be, or getting bumped by stuff they shouldn't, and it just got messy. And so it was messy for like an hour, which was a little frustrating for folks. And so tonight we go back in and clean things up and get some Mythic Prog in. So I'm hoping that will be 3, if not 4 Mythic tonight, if we can, and that'll give us, catch us back up on the headway that we're hoping to get for. But that was my raid stuff past week. What did you get up to raid-wise last week?
So raid was quite busy, as you might imagine, early season, 3 full nights. We only raid 2 hours at a shot, but still, it's a lot of raiding for the week. Tuesday was kind of scheduled to be our last full normal clear for now, in terms of the raid schedule. And geez, man, normal was really just we just blasted it so fast, and the bosses like phase out and die so fast that it was clear we weren't even getting any kind of good practice for the bosses we still needed to prog on, right? Because the bosses do things on Heroic. There's things you have to do on normal. Like we just we're lucky in the sense that we picked up a lot of good players between Shadowlands and Dragonflight, and we have a lot of our core group still together from the old days. And our median skill has just gone up so high in the last 3 years. I do feel like the raid is tuned a bit easier than maybe what we've seen in recent years too. But we're just blasting so hard that it's a little unbelievable. So we finished full clear, had our skip unlocked and everything for the future for normal. And it was like we're an hour into raid, something like that. We still had an hour left, or maybe about that, and no time walking raid last week or anything. I didn't want to start the Heroic ID since we're doing the full normal and then full Heroic nights, back to back, and I had different comps set up for both, so that wouldn't really be fair to the people who had out Tuesday but in Wednesday. So we said, all right, let's grab alts. We'll just do some more normal, So I went and got the monk. Other people grabbed some alts, and we got like 4 more bosses down with alts in normal. So that was pretty fun. Wednesday was starting up Heroic, and we just zoomed, man. We got back through 5 of 8 with Nexus Princess, and then we were going on a Brood Twister for Prague, and we one-shot it. Just the first look at it that night, it was just dead. And we went, okay, well, I guess it's on to Silken Court. We had about an hour, maybe 45 minutes or so to look at Silken Court, and it was going okay. I think we had a couple sub 30% wipes, but on that fight, it just becomes sort of a war of attrition, right? Like as you're learning, you're losing people along the way, which makes just everything that starts happening later on more punishing. So we didn't quite get there. but in really good shape for Prague on Sunday. And then while we were, on some off nights, some nerfs came in, which included nerfing Silken Court to be mechanically identical to normal.
Yeah, basically.
And I went, well, okay, this is going to die then. And so we actually two-shot it last night. We only needed 2 pulls to prog it. And so we spent the rest of the night on Ansarek, which was really cool.
Nice.
I feel like we're super ahead of schedule in terms of overall prog. Ansarek felt pretty rough, though. We never got out of phase 1 with any kind of, actual critical mass of players alive. And I mean, I had 28, 29 in for most of the pulls. It did feel like it would be a lot easier with fewer people.
Yeah.
28 is a lot to raid with by modern standards. They just don't really design the fights with that size group in mind. And so, it ends up being a lot of confusion because it's the last boss of the raid. So there's a lot of execution involved, and then the tuning is high. And so little mistakes really add up quickly, especially with a big group. It didn't feel great, but it was also that feeling of it's week 3. This is sort of our top line goal for the whole raid tier, and we're already looking at it. So, kind of hard to feel bad about it or anything, but this week we'll go back in. We'll do normal skip. We'll see what that looks like. I'm hoping it's 178 and not like 1, 2, 3, 4, 7, 8 or something like that. Like I want to skip most of the bosses, hopefully. And we'll do that on Tuesday. Get some last 2 boss loot out. Some Omni tokens. People are still looking to round out sets and everything. And then we'll start up heroic on Tuesday right away. And we'll see where we get. If we get to Sunday and we're still kind of just treading water on Ansarek, I might cut numbers down and get a more kind of focused group going, because I want people to get reps and see the fights and stuff, but also there's also that responsibility I have to the group to keep moving forward, and doing what's right for the overall group. So,
right.
I don't want to cut heads if I don't have to, but I also feel like if the core team is getting us AOTC week 4 or 5, then you're going to be okay. If you're on the bench for now, we'll get you in. You'll get situated by the end of the tier. So the thing that I'm really thinking about now is what's attendance going to look like for Mythic, because we'll move into Mythic Prague as soon as Ansarek's dead, basically. And so then it'll be a question of how long can we hold out with like 22, 25 people in orbit who are willing to show up and check Mythic out.
Yeah.
In the past, we always kind of hit like 18, no matter how many people I had lined up. And then it's like, well, we really can't do it. This time might be different, though. This expansion has a lot of different hooks for players to engage with and keep a character up to date or geared up or wanting to play. So I would like it if we could keep having a new boss to look forward to on a weekly basis. And also, we are going to be getting that raid zone wide buff coming in, I think, next week. Not this week coming up, but I think next week it's going to start kicking in. And that's going to be huge for teams that are progging on anything. Just that continued investment in playing the raid, you're going to get stronger against it just by a flat percentage every week. That's going to be awesome, I think, for a team like ours.
Well, I'll give you an Ulgrax Mythic tip, all right? The biggest thing that made a huge difference for our team, especially against Ulgrax on Mythic, was the ads will always spawn during the intermission on the opposite side of where Ulgrax comes up. Position your team where Ulgrax is going to come up, and just tell everyone to chill out and let the ads come to you. Because what it means is, when you kill all the ads and all their meat drops on the ground, it drops in range to just give it to the boss when the boss comes back up, which means that you have really fast feeds during that fight.
Yeah, that's good. Yeah, versus, the platform's going to be, what, like 120 yards across or something? And that's a long way to go back and forth to feed them.
Yeah.
That's good advice just on any difficulty, really, know? You want to get that part over with as soon as you can.
Yeah, so that made a big difference of just, this is simple and great and easy, because there's a lot of things that change, like getting webbed is a much more serious thing on Mythic, and obviously all the damage is increased, and you get larger ads. There's different ad groups that are, now attacking stuff that happens on Mythic, but setting yourself up to be in a position where you can just go pick up the food, walk 3 feet, throw the food to the boss, go back over, pick up the food, walk 3 feet, throw the food to the boss, and you just watch that percentage counter on him being fed just skyrocket up and finish in like 6 seconds is great compared to, okay, everyone run across the room. Okay, now everyone run back across the room. Okay, everyone run across the room. And every time they're running, there's a chance to get the webs.
Yeah,
so,
really. Well, skulls are his favorite. So, you got to give him what he wants.
That's right. Exactly. All right. Anyways. So that was raiding this past week. Mythic Plus this past week was a whole other beast. But before I talk about Mythic Plus, I want to talk about prep for raiding and prep for Mythic Plus that I was going through. So I have now leveled 3 characters to 80, and I have 1 character who's 75. And 2 of those characters I did, so my mage and my priest is 75, were leveled primarily through crafting as the main thing that they did for the bulk of their front end of their leveling. My mage is an enchanter tailor, and my priest is an enchanter scribe. My mage does permanent enchants on gear, because I initially wanted someone who could do like my defenders to my boots, my defender's march to my boots. I want someone who could do my crystalline radiance to my chest piece, things like that are more expensive enchants, and have that going. And on my priest, I was like, hey, I just want a gathering profession on my priest, and I didn't want to have another person who did herbing or mining, and I didn't feel like skinning worked as well for a priest. It's kind of weird and Scarlet, crusade kind of creepy. So I figured I'd go with enchanting and just go straight down the disenchanting path, so that my priest just disenchant stuff. And there's something I noticed that was really odd. My priest very, very quickly caught up to my mage on enchanting, because disenchanting gets you skill ups, and it seems like I just never stop potentially getting additional knowledge points. So the knowledge points you get from disenchanting, you just keep getting dust and keep getting dust and keep getting dust. I think I finally caught up now, but whatever the catch up, like the backlog of that catch up is massive for enchanting. It might be that if you hadn't been participating in enchanting since the beginning of the expansion launch, you could actually take a character, max level them, spec into disenchanting, and just disenchant your way to have the same amount of knowledge as someone who had been playing an enchanter since the beginning of the expansion, which is crazy because you can't do that with any other profession. If you missed out, you missed out.
I've had a similar thing with my druid though, with herbing. Unless my weak aura is wrong, I have that nice weak aura tracker that shows you your weeklies and your uniques, so you make sure you're all caught up. And my weeklies were showing 0, and I was still getting some of the branches or whatever they are that give knowledge from herbing. So maybe there is some kind of background catch up in there, which would be great, because Dragonflight desperately needed that. Like it was just too daunting. It was too unrewarding to start a profession late, especially if you're trying to be competitive in the market. So. Anecdotal, we don't have like real concrete information here, but I think there is some kind of knowledge catch up not for the, like the weekly quests or whatever, obviously, like that's a one and done deal, but for the stuff that you earn via repeating doing the profession, task. It seems like maybe there's some catch up in there for that. So that's really good.
So the second tip I wanted to give along those lines is for those people who are out there doing enchanting. Invest 5 knowledge points into your ephemerals, enrichments, and equipment. All right. Those 5 knowledge points will let you pick up deceptive decorations, and you will gain more knowledge points out of putting 15 points into deceptive decorations than it costs for the 15 points to go into deceptive decorations and the 5 points to go to ephemeral equipment. Because for your first time crafting, for all of the different disguises that you can make in that, there's like 30 disguises, and you're investing 20 points. So you come out ahead in knowledge by just investing in that. So to me, if it's like, if you're going to start into enchanting, obviously the designated disenchanter is incredibly powerful. You at least want to invest into that early on. But getting 5 points into ephemeral enrichments just puts you on a path to being like, all right, now here's an additional 10 points if you just do a whole bunch of enchanting. And if you do that early, you're gaining skill ups off of all of those masks that you make, which is also a huge way to skill up really quickly because they're quite inexpensive to make, which is really nice. So that's the other tip for enchanting stuff I wanted to throw at the beginning here for folks who are getting into that, because that's a big one on that front. And I guess since I was talking about leveling characters, I'll also mention this. If you do the quest chain, for the Kobold quest chain down in the depths, that unlocks the candle vendor. this little candle vendor dude. He has a candle on him that if you purchase just makes you do fire damage to things that you're attacking. And it's like a lot. It's like a lot of fire damage. It's hundreds of thousands of fire damage. So if you're leveling up and you're like, hey, I like to, pull larger packs and pick on things and fight things like that. That is a good one to purchase, this like 5 gold candle that lasts a 1 hour buff that just devastates mobs that you're fighting with fire. So certainly worth picking that up as well as far as leveling goes. But the reason why I got into all these professions, the whole concept behind all of it, is I wanted to do a lot of my own crafting. And in Dragonflight, I never really dove that deep into the crafting system because it honestly was poorly described. There were no guides out there that really helped me at all, including video stuff that I'd watch. And in general, it was a fairly obtuse system to sort of get into and try and understand. And I wanted to dive really deep into it in War Within because I don't like having things in WoW that I just don't get and can't wrap my head around, especially as someone who likes to speak about the game and help with that and talk about it. And so professions in general, I do want to do a chat at some point when our shows slow down a bit to sort of break down how all this stuff works and how to take advantage of it and, what you should sort of be doing on a regular basis. Those are probably things we should talk about at some point on the show for folks to have an interest in this. But I wanted to craft my mythic staff, my 636 staff is what I really wanted to do this past week. So I was able to get 90 of the gilded crests, which are the ones you get from doing 9s and 10s in Mythic Plus. I then had to go over to a vendor next to the enchanting vendor and buy an enchanted gilded crest with these 90 crests, which then meant I had another item, which is this enchanted crest, which I could then go over to an enchanter and enchant that into being a proper gilded crest that could be used to upgrade gear like you would get from doing that PvP quest that I talked about that let you get a heroic piece if you wanted to. So you get an actual like token you can use for crafting to make it mythic. So I got one of those. And I got my sparks. I got my 2 sparks that I had to use to make a staff. I think the whole concept of sparks, honestly, is kind of dumb. I really dislike it on a huge level because I think it really limits people's creativity and what they can do with crafting. And I know it's supposed to like rein in power because it limits how many nice crafts people can make. But I think it is literally a chokehold on the system, and I dislike it a lot. So that I don't like. Anyways, I had to get my sparks, and I got all the materials together. And then I was like, okay, so my scribe, I have to have enough skill level to make tier 5 of a staff. And every time that you add a missive to it to be like, I really want the stats to be these type of stats, or I want this embellishment on an item, then that increases the difficulty more and more and more. And even just applying the token, the mythic token, to set it to mythic item level increases the difficulty by 150 skill points. It's huge. So I then had to like find ways to get knowledge as desperately as I could to try and get my scribe up far enough and spec deep enough into staves to be able to make this thing at the tier that I want to, which I managed to do throughout the week. A large part of that was doing crafting orders and staying on top of crafting orders. And that was a system that, again, I want to describe it in a later episode in much more detail because it is obscure and obtuse and you can screw things up really easily, and I dislike that. So just bear that in mind. But I managed to craft my 636 staff, which was great. I was very pleased about that, very happy about that. And so that is now up and running and using an embellishment on my druid who has a cloak that I made on my tailor, which then doubles the power of that embellishment because you can have 2 crafted items on any character at any given point. And that's it. It's just the 2 crafted, which again makes me feel like sparks are kind of redundant and weird because you can only wear 2 pieces of crafted gear anyways. So
embellished ones. If they don't have an embellishment, you can wear them. But they're mostly like stopgaps. If you're doing the 90 crest mythic tier, they don't go all the way up, right? They stop 6 item levels short of the cap.
Yeah,
exactly. The main thing is you want to wear 2 so you can have 2 embellishments because it's free stuff. And so part of the strategy is like, what are the 2 lowest impact slots I can have crafted embellishments on? Because you want that big stat budget in other places. Probably you don't want to rock like a crafted helm or legs or something. You probably want bracers, belt, boots, cloak, stuff like that.
Rings, neck. Those are all good choices. Rings and neck. This right now people can socket twice. Although I learned this week, my time lost ring that I got from doing Black Temple, you can't socket. Not allowed. You can upgrade,
Huh.
You can't sock it.
That's weird. I wonder if that's like unintended or something. I wonder if we'll see that get fixed as the expansion rolls on.
It's a bit of a weird one. So I did a lot of crafting this week, and that was where a lot of my focus went, was learning the systems and where best to use points, and regretting where I used points in one case, and feeling like, oh, should I just make another character who does this profession because I can catch them up pretty quickly with things, and like it's a very strange feeling to sort of end up with crafting professions, where it's like, oh, okay, well, I like that the inspiration behind it is, hey, we want people to go and find other people who specialized in making shields when they want to get their shield made. What they don't want is someone to go, hey, I'm just going to level up another character who's going to be my shield guy, and I'll just go to him whenever I want shields, right? I wanted to be able to make my own staff because I wanted to, in future patches, be able to recraft that staff the way that I wanted to be able to do it. And I generally play casters in general, so it seems like a really good item that I can make for a lot of different characters, which is also really powerful in that sense. And I want to be able to do my own chants and my own gems, so I have those things as well sort of covered. So yeah, it's overall, I think the crafting system, I like it a lot as a system. I just feel like there's a few things that could really be improved. I think Sparks is one of them. I think the profession knowledge drop off after you've sort of purchased up all the knowledge that you can from vendors is really steep in a lot of cases, with that you're only getting 7 points or so a week of knowledge, like dramatically slows that system down. So I wish that was a little bit more free and handed out, but I also respect that they're trying to keep crafters specialized in certain areas and make it a challenge to sort of specialize in multiple ones. And that's the direction they're going. So crafting was the other big thing I got into this week, and that prepped me for Mythic Plus. And I know you're going to want to talk about Mythic Plus a bit here too. So I did 8 10s, and then 2 9s for the week. I still have tonight to try and get 2 more 10s if I want to get 3 Mythic choices. It was a heck of a week in Mythic Plus. It was definitely challenging, but I know I don't like the current affix more than I like the previous one. Last week's affix was better than this week's, and I'll say that because there are certain bosses that suck to have this affix on, because the orbs will come in ways you cannot get them without dying. And then they will make their way to the boss and actually empower the boss, or to add the boss spawns, which I found out in Miss when orbs hit the fox that was CC'd across the room and empowered the boss.
They just go,
and I was like,
yeah,
what?
That's all that happened on a few fights. Yep.
Yeah. We had the Tidewalker at the end of Siege of Borealis, where all the orbs spawned inside of the wave and then moved in with the wave behind him. And there was no way, unless we had a Pally bubble, to get those, which means the boss is just going to get empowered. We had the second boss inside of Arakara, which is the big beetle boss that does the like dead zone and then the safe circle you have to move around in. And we had the orb spawn during that and come swooping in through the dead zone to be able to hit the boss. We had first boss of the City of Threads, where we're inside a locked circle. You can't leave it. They yoink you back in, and all the orbs came flying in from a side that we had to try and rotate to try and get to, while we had debuffs that we didn't want to drop on top of everyone. So that affix to me is just like a bad affix for Mythic Plus. It's probably the worst one we've seen so far when it comes to this expansion by far. We still have 2 more to see, and we'll see how those go. We're going to get a different one tomorrow, and obviously then we should know what's happening the week after, and then we can start actually talking about the rotation and what's going to happen with the rotation for folks and prepping them for it inside our Mythic Plus segment. But man, this one had some challenges. It's cool. It just had some challenges.
And it also kind of rendered Siege like just a dead key earlier in the week, because you couldn't really get the orb. The orbs were not behaving properly, and they were going out to the squid instead of around the area where you were fighting, and they'd like spawn out in the water. Yeah, I mean, overall, it was it's a little less visually noisy than the first affix that we saw. There's not like 10 plates that pop up every minute, but yeah, there was some really weird overlaps with bosses, and I'm wondering if maybe they could tweak some of that stuff. Maybe have some logic where it won't spawn during certain mechanics or whatever. I don't know if that's possible, but yeah, I mean, I had a very similar experience with the Sea Giant in Siege of Borealis, where it was like, okay, well, the orbs are out as we're dodging the 2 sets of waves, and we can get some of them, but this boss is already pretty, it's pretty gnarly.
Now it's just got
of this. 3 or 5. It got a whole bunch of orbs, and maybe somebody died trying to soak an orb and then caught a wave or something. It's just, it was very disruptive in some situations, and it was like a non-issue in other situations. If you're in like a really like directional hallway, right, and the orb just kind of come out at the far end and the near end, and they just collapse down, and two people on either side can just easily collect all of them. Like, that was fine. And then there were some situations where it was just like, well, we got to let a couple of them through because we need to live. And if we can't deal with the empowered boss, we can't deal with it. But, you're going to die if you stand in the mechanic and then get the orb. So what are you going to do?
The other thing that folks had to deal with is if the pack you were fighting that spawned the orbs dies and you drop out of combat, the orbs just freeze in place. And so we had times, which you might have as well, where the orbs spawned as we killed the last mob, and so all of the orbs were either 30 yards behind us, which someone had to like run around to try and gather, so we actually had the buff, which was a good buff to have, or we had to like calculatedly pull the next pack, because as soon as you aggro it, they walk into the orbs, or the orbs chase to them, and you're like, oh, okay, these orbs are 1 yard away from them. How do we pull this boss to pull this pack to make sure they don't just get like 6 orbs at the start of the pull? So that also was something that bothered. I would have preferred they despawned than they sat there like that.
The buff is only 20 seconds. So like if they're all the way back in another room or whatever, and then you killed all the trash in the hallway and you're moving up farther, by the time the person who went back to get the far ones comes back, like the buff is done anyway. So it can create some weird problems with mobs that you weren't in combat with when the orb spawned. I noticed that too. They do despawn after a few seconds. I was doing a stone vault, and it was those dangerous packs that are through sets of doors, and I was trying to LOS one side out, but each one of them had an orb right in front of them, so I had to wait until the orbs despawned, so they wouldn't just immediately walk through them and get buffed. But it's the first time we've seen it. They did make some adjustments to it already, which we will get into in hotfixes, but I wouldn't be surprised if this one needs a little bit more attention just to feel good to play against. I don't think it's quite there. I think the design overall is okay, but having it come in at the exact same time where your positioning or your movement is really tested is a bad feeling, because yes, there is plenty of counterplay to this affix, but not all the time. Sometimes there's no counterplay to it. So I think that was what I was feeling about it. Like, the buff is cool. It's nice to have in many situations. It's not hard to deal with, but sometimes it's kind of a waste of time to acquire in those situations where you get it at the very end of killing one pack, and sometimes it's super dangerous to try to collect them because of a boss mechanic.
I thought of 2 other examples I want to give. One was last boss of Arikara, where everyone is rooted themselves so they don't get sucked in and die, and the orbs coming at the same time as that means that there really isn't a counterplay, which is very unfortunate. Depending on your group comp, obviously, I think a Death Knight or a Paladin could probably do it, because I think Bubble might save you through that and be fine, as well as I think you can just, whatever the walk that Death Knights do, that they can do that stops them from being pulled. That's advanced.
They can't be like relocated or whatever the actual wording is, but
that could potentially help you there too. The other one that stood out in a really big example for me was these orbs look awfully similar to the orbs that we see on the 3rd boss of City of Threads. If you've done that boss this week and you were like, wait a minute, which orbs are which orbs? They're all purple orbs, and they all are moving towards the boss, and they all spawn from the sides of the room.
And they do different things, and like, you need to soak all of them to a degree, but there's a different priority system. That was a real yo dog, I heard you like orbs, so we put orbs in your orbs kind of situation. The big Scarden monster boss in Stonewall is a similar thing, right? Because that spawns the orbs you need to soak to get the absorb shield and all that. So it's I don't think it's awful. It's not an afflicted or incorporeal situation, but I think it needs some tweaks to feel good. I don't think it's quite there yet.
Yeah, I'm with you on that one for sure. Man, Mythic Plus this past week, and then outside of that, was there anything else you got up to you wanted to chat about?
Well, we started really making some progress. I mean, when we talked on the show last week, I mentioned like I just spent most of week 1 doing 2s and pushing keys up and then losing the person who had the key and then starting back over. Luckily, like we got some pretty good off nights in for keys, and I finished the week like in the 1800s or something. So started up this week, and we kind of hit the ground running. We didn't have to start with low keys. Obviously, everybody had at least like middling keys. So I spent most of the week doing 9s and 10s so far. No 10s in time yet, but we still need 20, 30 item levels, to get to the top of the food chain here. So honestly, like overall, I think the landscape, it's feeling pretty good. I finished the week just a shade under 2,200 rating. So got Keystone Master done and all that, which was cool because I got the last heroic set piece that I didn't have, which let me swap something out and get some kind of better stats. The mount is sweet. I think it's the best Keystone Master mount they've ever done, and it's not close. So that felt good. And I think the challenge for my group right now with Mythic Plus is just going to be making sure that we're not like breaking too many 9s, and trying to stay in that 9-10 range, because that's where you get the rewards that we really want that are going to push our power. And we're kind of on the cusp where like a 9 can easily go sour pretty fast, because once you get lower than that, now you're sort of in that heroic range in terms of currency and rewards and all that. We need to keep moving up the ladder. I will say, like, there is a vast difference in
difficulty,
overall tuning. Dungeons like Stone Vault and Grim Batol feel really hard compared to stuff like Miss Scythe. I'm sure that'll get evened out. Also, like, I don't think that it's a bad thing to have harder and easier dungeons within a seasonal pool, right? But because I think it's okay to have some variety, have some texture, and have some, it means something, right? Like if you do this Stone Vault well, that means that your team played excellent in order to do that, right? That's okay, but I also think the difference between the hardest and the easiest dungeon needs to be a little narrower,
agree.
And I don't think they should make anything harder. Like, I'm not saying buff Mists of Tyrannosaith or something, but it's just I think, like, you look at stuff like the duo boss in Stone Vault, and the bar for execution is so much higher than almost anything I've felt in the pool so far. They nerfed it a bit this week, and it feels a little bit better.
Yep.
But there's just some stuff that feels like it's borderline unfair. It's just so much harder than stuff that gives the same reward. That gives the same rating, same item level that it drops, all that stuff. It's like, again, it's early days. It's only week 2. Stuff needs to be evened out. But like, there's a clear distinction between the hard keys and the easy keys right now.
Yeah. I mean, you didn't mention Necrotic Wake third boss, but that is still a boss that stands out as one that is a make or break for a lot of those keys. And I will say that there's still timers that are much tighter than other timers. Miss is by far the most forgiving timer that we have in Mythic Plus from what I can see out of this season. And things like Grim Batol tend to be some of the hardest and tightest timers, where if you have, one wipe, because it's triple the punishment when it comes to Mythic Plus stuff over 7s, you are now like on the cusp of being able to actually finish that in time, depending on your DPS and how well you can handle pulls and what's going on with it. Like 5 or 6 deaths put that thing into like a range of, oh shoot, we need to be really careful going forward when you're doing a keystone like that. And I think that's okay to have those sorts of unforgiving situations, but I agree that the difference between Miss and Grim is a fairly large difference. They could probably back Grim off a bit to make it a little bit, add 2 or 3 minutes to that timer and back that thing off a bit, so it's a little bit more forgiving for folks who are struggling with the difficulty of that dungeon. So yeah, I'm with you on that one. All right, only the last 2 things I want to mention is I did do the question mark difficulty Zekvir solo last night. Knocked that out because I felt really bad about the raid night and the fact that we didn't get Queen down, and that really bothered me. So I was like, I need to go smash something. So I was like, all right, well, I got a heroic spyglass from our clear, so let's go use the heroic spyglass. And went and nice. And did that. That took me, I think, 5 or 6 attempts to do. That change came in this past week. That's a wonderful change for Zekvir. For those folks who weren't aware, they changed it so that Zekvir's cast times on things that should be interrupted is now variable based off of which class you are attempting to do Zekvir on. So since I'm on a Boomkin and I have a 1 minute interrupt, it meant that his cast for his heal would always happen slightly past 1 minute in duration, so that I always had my interrupt up. it is something where it only takes him 1.5 seconds to cast that heal. So you don't have to be paying attention to go, oh, shoot, there's the heal, interrupt. Or I haven't done, and you haven't done it in a while because it's not something you have to regularly do because it's once every minute. But they did make that much more accessible than where it was. Previously, I'd have to be like trying to shift into Bear and Skull Bash and like rotating back and forth through forms a lot more to try and stay on top of it. And even then, you might not. And so you're like, okay, well, this fight then just gets really long because he's healing for 20% health every, third time he goes to cast a heal because I don't have a way to interrupt it. So that was really healthy and good for them to change. I was very happy to see that happen. The only last tip I will mention to everyone is get yourself a Candle Confidant if you're a caster. This trinket is the most broken thing right now. It is so weird. This is just a clear example of this. All right, everyone wants the Sackbrood trinket of Arakara. A 636 Sackbrood trinket is when Sackbrood becomes better than a 610 Candle Confidant. That's the difference. There's a 26 item level difference in the comparison I just gave you. That is how powerful the Candle Confidant is. So I love my little candle buddies. Wax and Wayne and all those guys chilling out. They do 3 to 4% of my damage on a boss fight. They are kooky.
Wow, that's pretty good.
Yeah. So definitely make friends with a Candle Confidant. You can get them from World Quest. You can get them from Delves. If you get them from the end of a delve, obviously that's great. If you get it from a map, you are got super lucky. If it pops up in your vault tomorrow, consider it, right? Versus other things that are up there. I imagine it'll get nerfed at some point because it seems way stronger than it should be. But yes, I as a Mythic Raider 620 eye level boomkin am wearing a 619 now because I upgraded it. Candle Confidant trinket with my spyglass. So
nice.
That is one of the things that's going on.
Yeah, for delves for me, like I've only been doing stuff to fill out vault slots. It's a time crunch, and like I kind of have talked about the last couple weeks, it's a lot. It's a lot to do 8 tier 8 vaults on many characters, So obviously the main is the main, and she's a priority. But now she's getting into that realm where if I'm going to get myth track choices out of keystones, like they're probably going to win most of the time anyway, even if it's something I don't really love. It's like, okay, well, this has got the highest top end, so this is the way I'm going. I did get in on the monk, and I got 8 tier 8s done on the monk, and I did some on the druid, but I didn't have time to do them all. I don't think I probably will do any more. So I got 4 in on the druid, which is still pretty good. I mean, the druid's got heroic 2-piece and hasn't set foot in a raid, a keystone dungeon, anything. Just that's from doing delves and doing them at tier 8 and have, just picking slots that have, set items and using the catalyst. I didn't even get any set items natively, like on the druid, and yet he's running around with heroic 2-piece on. So
yeah,
that feeling is great. I'll tell you that much. Like that's kind of when I started seeing like from BlizzCon, like what delves were going to be and what sort of the vision for them was. I was like, if it works like that, that's going to be really sweet for the way that I like to approach my alts. And so far, it's paying off, man. It feels really good to have that much power on those characters. And then, because that makes clearing the delves more fun to do, and I feel better, and it's more time efficient. And then, I could step in on an alt raid on my monk week 3. When would I ever do that, and not be way behind the gear curve? Like I'm in a reasonable item level to do that. Maybe I'm even higher item level than most stuff that's dropping. I have heroic 2-piece on the monk. Like to just step in and just mess around in an alt raid that early, that was awesome. And that's there's some weird, delves are finding their identity, right? So they're in a bit of a weird place right now, and I get the impression that some players resent how much power you can get out of delves because then people with a lot of character power go into other more difficult group content and maybe don't have the tools to use it properly. But I don't think that that's a problem with delves themselves or the delves reward structure. I think that's a long-standing problem with the overall social dynamic of WoW, and that rewarding people with good gear because they've expressed skill at a decently high level in solo content, I don't think that there's anything wrong with that. So
yeah,
I'm having a great time, and I'm certainly using it to my advantage, and it feels really good to have this stuff, and I get the mogs and everything, man. I love everything about that whole cycle. I just don't have enough time to do as much of it as I would really like to. So, I think probably I'll get to the point where I just stop kind of doing it on the main, and then eventually kind of cycle tunes through until they don't need any 616s anymore.
So here's a
if we get there.
Here's a time saver for you. All right, for folks who are geared enough that they're like, I want to get the vault loot. I don't really get anything out of the end of a delve, and I want to get my 8 delves in, or I want to get at least 4 delves in this week. Zekvir single question mark difficulty counts as an 8 delve towards your vault. So you can beat the crap out of him a few times and get yourself your vault completed in less time than if you were to run 4 vaults yourself. If that's something that you're up for doing. Okay.
It is important to remember, like, you just have to complete the delves to get the row credit for your vault. It doesn't have to be bountiful. And you don't have to get anything at the end of it in order for it to count for the weekly progress.
Yep.
So, yeah, keep that in mind. So sometimes there's just like a daily delve that's up, that's bountiful, and it's a fast run, and it's like it's great to target that, blast through it. You could do it again if you want to. If you're not concerned about end of run loot, then yeah, sometimes just go in the fastest route. If the lack of variety isn't gonna mess up your brain, right? Like it's a good method. But I have seen confusion. Still up to this point about like how the delve row really works. It's the world row, right?
Yes, it's the world row. Yeah.
Delve row, you get the highest level stuff out of it, and some confusion around like how that fills out, and like if you need to do bountiful or not, and everything like that. And the answer is basically you don't have to do anything. The reward is based on how many delves of a difficulty tier you've completed.
Yeah.
And that can be, you can repeat one as many times as you want. You could do bountiful versus non-bountiful. It all counts for, the weekly choice.
What would solve all of that confusion, which is something that if Blizzard's listening, please, what will solve all of that confusion, add in the exact same thing you have for Mythic Plus row for Delve and World row, where if I mouse over it, it tells me what I've done this week that contributes towards it. Because me going, hey, I've done some delves this week, but I don't have that reward yet, and you mouse over it and it goes, complete a delve to improve this to 1 step higher item level, and you're like, okay, so you run a delve and it doesn't improve or change, and you're like, oh, well, I guess I have to run 2 of them. I must have only run 2, so now I have to run another one so that I have the 4, and that'll give me the 4 rewards to run another one, and then it upgrades, and you're like, okay, now I remember I've done 4 things, but in 3 days, I'm not going to remember I've done 4 things. Maybe I think I did, 6. And then you're trying to get the
mouse over. The mouse over tooltip is really rough for the world row, because so many things contribute to the row at very low item level, and it doesn't give you that list of what is contributing to the row right now.
Yeah,
which that would help
massively.
It would also help if we could get some kind of counter or some other visual where we knew how many keys we'd earned of the 4 keys we can earn every week. Sometimes I forget. I have other stuff to do anyway. So if I do Awakening the Machine on a tune, you get a ton of currency, right? So it's good to do that anyway. And I don't get a key because I already got my 4 keys. And I go, okay, well, I know I have all my keys, but sometimes it's hard to remember. Like, how many have I earned up to this point in the week on this tune? So I think some little UI tweaks could go a long way in just communicating more stuff about delves and the world row to the player.
Yeah. Okay, well, let's put this aside. Let's hop into what's going on this week in World of Warcraft. Going right now. Well, I hope you liked our conversation about Delves, because this weekly event is the Delves bonus event going on, where a sign of the Explorer buff hopefully is going to be up. This is a data mined piece of information that we grabbed off of Wowhead that says the Delver's Journey progress gains increased by 25%. So you're going to move a quarter faster in that progress journey, as well as companion experience gains are increased by 25%, which means Brand's going to be earning that extra 25% experience. And you get 25% more Undercoin, which is that currency you use to buy all the fun things, including extra keys, which you can buy. Once you've completed the Delver's Journey, you'll be able to buy extra keys. So that is a nice unlock to have for your alts, if that's something you're wanting to do, because you can move Undercoin around through your warband. We don't know what the reward or quest or anything is going to be for the week. It might be to run 2 delves. It might be to beat Zekfir. We have no idea what it's going to be. So we will have to wait and see as to what that is. But yes, the data mine buff that's out there sounds pretty impressive to me and is something that I think a lot of players would really enjoy this early in it. I only know a few people who've run enough delves to finish their journey. Those people have run hundreds of delves. So I'm just putting it out there that like, that's not your average person right now. So most people will be enjoying a lot of this buff. And even those people will probably still enjoy getting the extra currency in from the undercoin gain.
Yeah, for sure. I think that Bran XP is going to be real juicy because as you start getting Bran up into the 40s and above, like he really starts contributing a lot. So if your Bran is lagging behind a little bit so far, it helps for me because I've been doing delves on 3 tunes, right?
Yeah.
I got the complete 100 delves achievement the other day. So nice. I've been busy in there, and I'm like, 2/3, 3/4 the way up the Delver's journey so far. I don't know exactly what level my Bran is, but he's getting up there, and that all contributes to smoother runs and everything like that. I'm curious to see what the quest is going to be, but really what I'm curious to see is what it's going to reward.
Yeah.
You compare it to the complete 5-time.
I hope it gives you a map. That's what I hope.
That would be really cool. It's like a guaranteed map would be amazing for my alts, which is the thing that lets you get a hero track item out of the end of run.
And you need 10 of them to finish the achievement, which I'm only 4 towards after running a lot of delves.
Man. Yeah, I got so many right away. I feel like they changed something. It's anecdotal, but I got a bunch. Like the first week, I got like 2 maps on the main and 1 each on the other 2. And then it really tailed off. But I'm not expecting this to be like do 4 delves and get like a 616 box, but I have a feeling that there'll be a gear reward and that it will be quite relevant for my alts at least. So pretty cool. But yeah, we've never seen it before, obviously, right? Brand new system, first time for the event. So just check in, make sure you pick up the weekly. I feel like a lot of people have delves in their sort of weekly diet at this point anyway. Yeah. So don't forget to grab this before you get out there and get started.
Yeah. All right. We also obviously have the regular stuff you should work your way through, doing at least 2 of these things with the Call of the World Soul that goes out there as a quest that might be something you can pick up. If you do, you'll get to choose from some options, either World Quests, Snuffling, Dungeons, Awakening the Machine, or the Severed Thread Pact are the things that you can choose to get that reward. However, you can do 2 of the world events regardless. So the Theater Troop, Awakening the Machine, Spreading the Light, Severed Threads Pact, World Soul Memories, or the special assignment quests that are out there to be sure that you're getting your, was it 583s? Is that what we're getting?
Yeah, I think it is. It's in the 580 range. Yeah. It's like below normal raid gear, but it's okay. It's good stuff if you're getting started with a tune or whatever. You want to get out there and get it. Of course, we've been talking about how this has been unpredictable so far. And then last week we didn't have the Call of the World Soul choice. The weekly was to collect 100 Titan disc fragments. And then we got the little story beat regarding the Azeroth World Soul and everything.
Yeah.
Yeah, which is cool how that's playing out, and I like that, but it does make it a little hard for us to frame your sort of weekly checklist on the show right now because we don't really know what's going to grant the Pinnacle cache on Tuesday as we're talking on Monday. One thing that happened last week was like I did the world boss and I wasn't in a group. I just cruised by where the world boss was and it was dying, so I tagged it, and I got 50 of the 100 disc fragments that you need. But if you're in a group, you didn't get those.
Yep.
So that kind of stinks. It shouldn't be correct to try to kill the world boss not in a group. But a really good way to get those fragments is from dungeon bosses. Each dungeon boss I think drops like 15. Yeah, and you get like 33 or 34 end of run in a delve. So
I want to highlight that you don't get any from Mythic Plus. So dungeon bosses might be a nice way to get them. You don't get any from Mythic Plus. So
right, you don't get them from the end of run chest.
Yeah.
You do like follower dungeon or something though, and get them. If you want to just bang it out real quick at reset, that's a good way to do it. If we probably won't have Titan discs this week, but we're also not at the end of that story. I feel like the Titan disc weekly is going to come up again in a couple
Every
weeks.
time there's sparks, I think we'll have that end up tying over. And I for me, it was delves. I just ran in and I did 4 delves and I finished it. And I'd also managed to do the world boss not inside of a group. That was super easy as well. Even on my alts, though, like I finished it throughout the week just doing world quests, which wasn't super hard. So you can just get that completed over a period of time pretty forgivingly. It's just if you want to get done like day one, yeah, there's a few activities you can do that are slightly better than others. And yes, I also agree that killing the world boss not in a group should not be the behavior that everyone's trying to do. Something that should be done in a group is world soul memories. I will give this other tip to folks out there. If you're going to go do your world soul memories that you get, it's that radiant sphere you get at the end of doing delve runs. You can do those in a raid group. And so I basically was like, oh, I'm out of keys right now for this week. Okay, but I have 19 of these orbs that I haven't used. How about I just do one of these? And so I pulled together a raid group, and I think I got like 12 or 14 people. I basically just went to one of those World Soul things, put up a group saying, hey, World Soul memory, and then the name of the area, and got people pretty quickly. We got 14 people in there, went in. I got 400 Valor Stones and 256 key fragments out of doing that for 5 minutes.
Yep.
And I did that because I used 5. You can choose to use more than one of the actual radiant spheres. So I used 5. And that 5 was the big difference maker for me.
Absolutely use the group finder for that. Yeah, that's great advice. I was doing that this week too. I hadn't done it before because I had plenty of keys banked up from the first couple of weeks where we couldn't use them. But this week I ran out of keys to get, 8 bountifuls or whatever. So I had to use some echoes and go do the world soul memories. And yeah, the first one you do on the account, like you can't use 5. So I just did one really quick to just burn through that part. And then I got in groups and started groups or whatever. And yeah, 5 minutes and you come out with enough fragments typically for 2 keys plus a little bit more.
Yeah.
So yeah, don't do those solo. Don't even do those in a small group. There's one thing about it that is a little weird with the way that the event works though, because if you're in a raid group, like the event is there, right? If you haven't clicked on the thing, it's still happening. You can even kind of see other players in there doing it if they're in there. I've had a couple times where I started a group and people would join the group and I would say in chat, like, I'm waiting for about 20. If everybody's cool to wait a few, like we'll round out and then we'll get a ton of fragments. Sometimes people don't pay attention to that and they just zoom in there and they start their own 5-minute timer and they're in there basically by themselves while, a bunch of us are waiting outside for everybody to convene. So if you join these, like keep in mind, like your goal is not to zoom out here and click on the thing. The event will be over before you even know it at that point. So, convene outside, make sure everybody's grouped up. And if you're starting a group, which you should do if you can't find one to join, communicate, set the expectations, use ready checks and countdowns, and get everybody in there at about the same time because the event is just happening, right? It's just going. And you have a personal 5-minute timer you get to be in there. So you want to align that with as many other people's timers as you possibly can.
Yeah, so I basically, once I got everyone together, I did a raid warning saying, looks like no one's joined in a little while, so we're going to, go on this. And then I did a countdown timer for 15 seconds to make sure everyone was like, okay. And the moment I started the timer, you watched everyone clump towards the orb, and you're like, everyone's paying attention, good, yay. And then basically the timer hit 1, and then we all went at the same time, which was great. So yeah, it's definitely a big tip on be sure you're going in with the group if you're doing group stuff, because otherwise you're by yourself and it's sad. You feel like you've wasted something. So yeah, I the most I've gotten solo, I think I got 100 key fragments and something like that when I was doing a solo run at one point when I had to do my first one solo, and that was like ages ago. I'm sure I'd do much better now as far as that goes, but there's no reason not to go into the raid group. It's just super simple, fun, smash DPS things. Someone throw heroism up, let's go, kind of fun experience. Okay, PvP brawl for the week is South Shore versus Terran Mill. This is the brawl that was introduced way back at the WoW 10th anniversary. So who knows if they're going to do a 20th anniversary version? Who knows? We'll see at some point down the line. But yes, it's the 40-on-40 deathmatch that takes place outside of South Shore and Terran Mill. And it's just Alliance versus Horde trying to push each other back into their own bases. And whoever happens to defeat the other team's resources first, as far as the resources being lives that characters have, wins. So if you're wanting a whole bunch of honor, it's a decent way to get a bunch of honor. If you want just silly deathmatch PvP, it is absolutely excellent for silly deathmatch PvP. So be sure you're taking part in South Shore Terran Mill if that's something that grabs your interest.
Yeah, not a lot of technique there. Just kill stuff, displace stuff if you can. Yeah, it could be kind of nice positioning here early in the season if people need stuff from honor or whatever, because you should get a lot from being in there, right? It's just HKs all the time. So, or if you need like achievements You know, there's achievements tied to how many HKs you have on different races or whatever.
Yeah.
Great time for that, because a 40 on 40, there's a lot of HKs going out nonstop, and the games are pretty quick. So
yeah,
one of the brawls that you can kind of hop into without really knowing any kind of strategy or technique. Just don't get too deep, and you'll probably be okay.
Yeah. All right. As far as world bosses go, Kordak, the Dormant Protector, should be back up on Isle of Dorn this week. And Mythic Plus fixes, we have Tyrannical. It's going to be kicking in back again this week. And it's going to be either Voidbound or Devour that we're dealing with. So this will mean that either Void Emissary spawns in while players are in combat inside the dungeon, and any mob that gets buffed takes reduced damage. Killing the Void Emissary gives players a buff that gives them 20% cooldown reduction and 10% crit for 20 seconds. So in other words, a mob will spawn while you're fighting a pack. That mob will start buffing other mobs that makes them take reduced damage. And your goal is to obviously prevent that from happening by defeating this spawn as quickly as possible. And that gets you cooldown reduction and additional crit, which means you can then use your buttons more frequently, which is super exciting. That's the Voidbound one. Devour is that players are periodically afflicted with a heal absorb while in combat. And you can either heal through this or dispel it. And that will give players a stacking 2% and 4% crit buff. Failing to heal or dispel the absorb will heal enemies for 10% of their health. So in other words, that would make a very difficult healing week, where you're essentially having to like heal through these absorb bubbles constantly on targets. But in doing so, you're giving everyone a big crit buff. I think in general, this is probably one of the least attractive ones that we have access to seeing. I think a Voidbound would be very fun to see. I think that's going to be a lot of fun with the cooldown reduction, how people choose to use that inside dungeons to adjust their routes and where cooldowns are used. And, does that bring all of your cooldowns back up, or is it only certain cooldowns, or is it, better to use cooldowns on different packs? That'll be kind of cool to play around with. Devour, to me, I think a 4% crit buff is just like, brr. Like it's stacking. So like you can get that up to like 20% because you have 5 people in your group. A 20% crit buff is nothing to like, sort of like, I guess, scoff at, but it's not as cool to me as a cooldown reduction or a haste buff or things like that. And the heal of the fact that it will heal enemies if it's not healed through, which also FYI means when your team takes a bunch of damage, they all have an absorb on them that you have to heal through before you can start healing the damage. So it's super dangerous. So I feel like Devour is going to be super dangerous when we finally end up seeing it. If you're someone who ventures high enough to do a level 7 affix, you will get the death cost 3 times more. So as opposed to 5 seconds per death, it's 15. And if you're doing 10s, you're going to be dealing with both Tyrannical and Fortified this week. Fortified will return at level 10 and above, and so you'll be feeling that extra health and damage on enemy trash inside of a dungeon. Man, how are you feeling about these two, Jason?
Well, these are too big. It depends, right? Voidbound, I love the buff because CDR is super fun. Haste and CDR change the way that you play. You get to push more buttons. You get to push that big button more times. That's just more fun, in my opinion, generally.
Yep.
Now, it depends. What it depends on is how hard is this mob to kill, and how bad is the buff that it's tossing out to the enemies that you're fighting. Like, obviously, you need to hard swap to this thing and kill it, right? Like, just no exceptions. You're not wanting to cleave stuff, and because it's making the enemies take reduced damage. So there's no point in killing anything other than the Void Emissary. And so, like, how much health does it have? How bad is the health scaling per keystone rank, right? These are sort of questions that I have. Overall, though, like, it should be basically okay.
Yeah.
Now, I think of it... Okay, let's think of one of the hardest situations you find yourself in the keystone pool right now. Like the duo boss in Stonevault, right? You're burning this thing down, but then the caster boss jumps away and it's got to be interrupted. Otherwise, you get the awful, movement speed reduction and the ticking damage. So you got to be pretty on point, right? Like whoever's job it is to switch, like you have to be able to turn on a dime, and you're burning the emissary down. Then you got to switch out to the thing and then switch right back to the emissary. So, but overall, it should hopefully be like in range of the stuff that you're fighting. hopefully it like just kind of melees and you can move around with it. Like as long as it works like that, I feel like it's going to be quite a bit less disruptive than, say, what we just saw with Oblivion, where, you know, positioning was really interrupted and could just result in not being able to play around it.
Yeah, depending on where, like if it spawns near an enemy, they're going to have to be really careful that it doesn't suffer from a lot of those sorts of situations where, like the last Ball of Grim Behold, do the tentacles count as enemies? Mm-hmm. If they do, could this, you know, NPC spawn on the other side of the room because the whole room's full of tentacles? Like, is that a possibility that could happen? Like, there's
or Siege of Borealis too, like spawn in the water next to the squid or whatever. And
exactly.
You can't get to it.
Yeah.
So, you know, that's what kind of goes through my mind about Voidbound. The upside is so huge, right? And we just need to be able to move this thing around. We can't have it be stuck in terrain, stuck in a prop, stuck in a wall where now it's evading or something and you can't kill it. Like, these are things I think about that could be problems with it, but as long as I can move the stuff around with the pack or the boss and go where I need to go with it and everybody can kill it, then I think it'll be okay. If you remember first season of Shadowlands, right, we had kind of a similar thing. We had that like blood elemental thing, the anima mob that would spawn every 20% trash completion. And that thing was like a mini boss in itself, basically. It would give you a great buff, but it was super dangerous. Like you needed to really plan out your route so you could fight it by itself. I don't get the impression this is going to be like that, but you know, how much of a damage sponge is this thing? Because if it is too hard to kill, then it really offsets the benefit that you get from the buff. So we'll see how that goes. The heal absorb, again, like, okay, a thing about this is it's not noisy, right? There's nothing in the field of play necessarily. There's not a mob, there's not a plate, there's not a moving object.
Yeah.
But it's a lot of noise for the healer.
Well, it's not. And I think I want to highlight that as part of the problem. If you're someone who plays with default UI, and how recognizable is it going to be to the average player that someone has an absorb shield on them and they require healing or a dispel to get rid of it? That's going to be a really important factor with this, because otherwise you could be like, oh, I'm healing the people who are taking damage. That mage is standing over there in nowhere and they're not taking damage. And then suddenly all of the trash heals for 10% health. And you're like, well, wait a minute.
Right.
What happened? Right.
There's a level of noisiness that it needs in order for you to be able to react to it. Yeah. A thing that I like about it from a design standpoint is I think of, you know, the Dragonflight affixes and all the times I felt like I couldn't contribute at all to what was happening with some of them, right? Like Afflicted and Incorporeal. This one, like I have an on-demand self-heal. It's, you know, it's a nice chunk of my max health. It's like 20% max health or whatever. I can't cast it exactly anytime I want to, but when we have Devour Week, I'll hold it, you know, and I'll make sure that I'm helping my healer out with a big self-heal bomb as soon as the absorb comes in. And I have some passive leech and stuff, so everything that I'm doing is contributing to breaking that heal absorb. So that's good at least, but it becomes a question of how big is the shield, right? And again, I think that is an important kind of knob that needs to be, you know, balanced here with these affixes, because if the heal absorb doesn't offset like the buff, then it's not tuned correctly, in my opinion, right? Like I think with these two most specifically, because you have these sort of direct relationships between damaging a mob or healing players, like that balance is a bit more delicate than when you have, cast your AoE stun on this set of, you know, targets, or stand in front of these crystals. This is much more throughput related, these other two affixes. So the juice needs to be worth the squeeze, so to speak. If we kill the Void Emissary and it takes longer than the time that we gain from the CDR buff, then that doesn't work out, you know. That's got to come out in the wash. So we'll see. I think we've probably seen like the two most intensive mechanically affixes so far. So these are more just throughput related.
Yeah. I would almost like to see a 5% slow attached to Devour is what I'd almost like to see, because then you could have things like Tiger's Lust and Freedom and shapeshifting,
any kind of snare breakers,
any kind of snare break suddenly becomes even tremor totem. If you could try and tie something in with that, where that would work, where any kind of snare break or disruption break could remove this debuff, would be a much more fun thing to play than, as you said, it'd be, oh no, you have to recognize that people have a shield in some way, and you either have to like have everyone group up into a mass dispel, which you can only do so often, and also it uses a lot of mana, or a revival to sort of get rid of those debuffs, or you have to just throughput through it, which I think is not super attractive when it comes to this sort of thing. It also means that healer dispels, because this is the other thing that factors in, become way more finite when it comes to this sort of thing, because there are plenty of debuffs that you get. Just take the first 2 trash pulls inside of Stonecore, where you have curses that grow out to people, or Stone Vault, where you have curses grow out to people, where, hey, you need to dispel those curses. Well, do you dispel the curse right away? Do you wait until this debuff goes out so that you're dispelling it and the curse at the same time? Do you dispel the curse and then this thing goes out anyways, and now the second person who has a curse is just dying because the absorb's so high you can't heal through it? Like, it's a tricky thing to play around with that. I like having other ways to get rid of that, where other, as you have always made the point of, different content or characters within your group, different classes can contribute to getting rid of these sorts of debuffs and help with that. And yes, there's certain classes that have self-healing abilities that can sort of help with that sort of thing, but I like it when there's like an off dispel that is going to be helpful. And, you know, it's great that this might make Shadow Priest more relevant. It's great that it might make Mistweavers more relevant, because these are classes that are underrepresented inside Mythic Plus, and I think it's great that this might actually help them sort of find their niche for their week. But I dislike when it becomes, here's the correct way to do something, and here's the correct group and group composition to always bring. And I think that's unfortunate, and something that we're seeing a lot right now with Resto Shamans, because Resto Shamans just have the most utility of any of the, you know, healing classes out there when it comes to dungeons, and so everyone wants a Resto Shaman, so they can just sort of handle everything that they might need to handle when it comes to the dungeon. So they do need to give some love towards other healers when it comes to that sort of thing as well. Okay, Brewfest is off and running and runs until October 6th, so you got 1 week left to get in there and finish up your Brewfest stuff, collect up your new Homebrewer's Sampling Mantle, as well as any other rewards you may have missed. Don't forget, you can also go to Dragonflight and get some more Brewfest tokens there, doing the bar tab barrels. That's traveling around to all the different 12 bar locations and getting 10 of those tokens per bar, as well as the daily quest for Barreling Down, which is riding a barrel down the hill and turning it into someone, as well as Bubbling Brews. So those are also quests you can do on top of your like regular, you know, Brewfest Chowdown and your other timed events that are there, as well as shooing away the Hosen, which really results in just hanging out inside Brewfest long enough that an event kicks off, or the Brawl with the Dark Iron Dwarves. And of course, you can also get out there and defeat Corin Direbrew and get yourself some more tokens that way, as well as some 571 loot, if that's something that interests you at all. And you might get a chance at your ram riding, your different ram and your Kodo that you might want to get drop-wise off of Corin as well. So Brewfest, certainly something that you should be watching out for. And the other thing kicking off is we're going to see, before we record again, we will see Darkmoon Faire happen. That's going to be happening on October 6th. So that will kick off then, and we'll run the week of October 6th. So be sure you are prepped up and ready for your Darkmoon Faire to kick off then, and we'll highlight Darkmoon Faire as we get into it that week. But just want to be sure people could count on their knowledge points for all of their professions and everything like that with Darkmoon. So worthwhile mentioning as well.
Yeah, and one thing I guess to point out about Brewfest is it ends Sunday, but not at reset. So you have like a 2-hour window for one more Corin, one more round. It ends like 10 a.m. Pacific, so that's like 2 hours after reset. So just keep that in mind, I guess. There's been a lot of stuff added to Brewfest over the years, and a lot of people are back into the game after long absences. So if you need it, just keep that in mind. If you can play early Sunday, you do have that last little window between reset and the event actually shutting off. So yeah, take advantage of it if you need to. I literally did the Brewfest stuff I talked about last week, and I haven't done anything else because that was all I needed was the new back piece, and I got 200 tokens at a shot, and it was done. But yeah, it's a great event, and they've added so much to it over the years. The stuff they added in Dragonflight, I really like in terms of just another vector for, to get some currency for the event. And also it's just cool when they take the holidays and they put them in new settings and you see different parts of Azeroth, like celebrate them or whatever. I like that from just like a role playing aspect. So it's cool if you need stuff from it. You know, you have quite a few resets left, really. So do it up.
What I would love to see from all of these holiday events is a choice to spend the currency you earn from the holiday event to purchase bags of currently relevant crafting materials for the current expansion. So Brewfest, if you could buy a bag of, similar to what we have with trading in wax, when you've traded in wax and you bought all the other rewards that you want, you can buy like a bag of enchanting goods or a bag of herbs or a bag of ore. If they did something similar with that, where you could spend the currency to buy those things, it would give players who've, like Jason, have already completed everything that they want to do with this sort of activity, a reason that if they enjoy the activity, there still is a reward attached to it for them. There's still a reason to do your ram riding and advertising and all that sort of stuff, just by throwing in those resources. Like, it doesn't have to be like, oh, it's highly desirable and you have to do it, and every player should, this is the best way to get resources, is go do Brewfest on like 12 characters. Like, no, that's not what it needs to be, but some sort of carrot does help this situation. So I think that'd be cool to see.
That would be cool, because the sinks that you have are usually related to like heirloom upgrades, and they're so super expensive. It's just there's no reason for, like, myself, for example, to go, I'm going to grind Brewfest stuff for 2 weeks so I can buy these heirloom upgrade items and save the gold. Like, you know what I mean? The bar is way too high for that. Whereas I was like, oh, I do Brewfest for 20 minutes and then I can get a bag of ore or whatever. You know what? Maybe I wouldn't do it, but maybe I would. Maybe I wouldn't do it every day, but maybe when I felt like doing it, then it's like, okay, there's a nice little carrot for me, and it's something I can actually benefit from while also doing the stuff in the game that I like, but there's just no pull there, That would be cool.
Yeah. All right. Hotfixes for this past week, and there's a lot of them. One of the biggest ones that we all loved was they fixed the guild achievement pop-up that was happening. Basically, apparently guilds can no longer earn faction-specific achievements that do not match the guild's faction. This should fix the occasional achievement spam for Diplomacy, United Nations, Dungeon Diplomat, Pandaren Embassy, and Ambassador achievements that were popping up when players logged in and out of the game. So, yeah.
Let me tell you how much work occasional is doing in that sentence. Because it's a lot. That's doing some heavy lifting in that sentence. I mean, granted, you're in a large guild. Yeah. I'm in a guild where we have 150 some people on at prime time. This was a nightmare for the last several weeks. It would pop up at the absolute worst times. You get that. There's like add-ons and stuff that we started running to get rid of it. It was a big headache. I'm super glad that they fixed it. That we've still had some, performance issues with the game and with BNet stuff dropping out and that kind of micro lag spike that you get, and you see like the entire guild roster come back online or whatever. Yeah. So obviously, like on the back end, stuff is cranking away. But yeah, this was a big one. This was starting to become like, I don't know, like slow drip of water that just like erodes away a mountain. We get this so much, especially, at prime time when people are doing raids and keystones and the stuff you really need to pay the most attention to, and the most people are logging in and out, and then you're just getting blasted with these. So this was huge. Thank you for fixing this. Because I played for like 3-4 hours last night and I didn't see it one time. Hooray.
Yeah. When someone has to develop an add-on that people have to run to fix a bug because it's so irritating that needed a fix. So yes, I'm glad that that happened for folks. Outside of that, we got a lot of bug fixes to different classes' abilities so that they were resolved. Like issues like for hunters, they fixed an issue causing Kodo Tranquilizer to dispel 2 magical effects in addition to making Tranquilizing Shot affect nearby targets. Yeah, that's not something that should happen. So a lot of those sorts of fixes came through. We also saw for enhancement shamans, with 2 stacks of Tempest available, Primordial Wave will now cause you to cast additional lightning bolts as intended, instead of casting additional Tempests. Yes, so kind of an important change there.
Listen, you're not going to like all the bug fixes, okay? Like, the bugs need to get fixed. Some bugs are good, some bugs are bad. Achievement spam, bad. Getting free magic dispels and stuff, good. But, the bugs got to get fixed one way or the other. So, there you have it.
We saw some delve fixes as well that came in, as well as some companion pet fixes. So one of the big ones for companion pets that people were actually questioning about on Twitter I saw was players should now correctly be awarded the Little Bone Chewer pet for completing the achievement Worm Theory. This applies retroactively, so I will be able to log in and have my Little Bone Chewer, as opposed to when I completed it and was like, that's weird, I completed it and didn't get the pet. So that happened to me.
Yeah, I earned this past week pre hotfix, and I was like, oh, where's my little guy?
Yeah.
And then I remembered somebody else on Twitter was saying that they had earned it and they didn't get it, and I said, oh, okay, that's that bug, and then it got fixed like the next day.
Yeah.
And there it is. So yeah, just, I mean, it's not like a very complex achievement, and the reward is not groundbreaking, but you do expect that, it says you're going to get the guy when you do the thing. So yeah, good fix. I don't know if you could have gotten it before this week, because I think it was based on some world quest or something rolling out. So they fixed it pretty quick.
Yeah. The other fixes we saw that came in for delves that I want to highlight is fungal foot pads. The, hey, look, you can jump twice and it heals you thing that's out there, which has often, actually, it's killed me once inside of a delve. Because the second jump will take you in the direction that you want. You're like pressing your arrow keys to go. And I definitely was trying to jump over something and bounced backwards and fell off a cliff because of it instead of a delve. But it will now heal you for... they fixed the issue where it can make you jump backwards. FYI, that actually is something they fixed. But they also made it so it'll heal you for a percentage of your maximum health as opposed to a static amount, which is also really nice because it was not healing me for very much at all. It was healing me for like 70k. And I'm like, well, I have 5.6 million hit points. That's kind of useless on a lot of levels.
Not a really good heal there.
Yeah.
Not really.
So that I'm glad has been fixed, but the tooltip will not be fixed until a future patch. So just be aware that it's still going to say it heals me for 70k, even though it's healing me for more than that. So that is a big one. They also reduced enemies' health and damage for solo healers going into these. I think this was primarily targeted at priests that they were doing this change for, because I know shamans were cranking through these things already on 8s. But yes, delves will be easier if you're queuing as a healer than they were previously. And also Bran no longer uses 30 yards of rope to dispel pets. That was one of those things where 30 yards of rope is supposed to be used to dispel you, which is really helpful on Zekvir. FYI, if you're doing a solo Zekvir, spec Bran as a healer, because he will dispel these poison debuff off of you every other dispel. You just have to get one of them yourself, and it does count as a snare, which means you can shapeshift out of it, or throw down freedom on yourself, or use a tiger's lust, or anything like that to sort of clear that poison dispel off of yourself. But also Bran will dispel it, which is really nice. So Bran as a healer is a great thing when you're fighting against Zekvir. And speaking of Zekvir, here's the hotfixes that came in for that. They reduced the damage and health on both difficulties. They made Horrendous Roar now a 2.5 second cast, as opposed to 2.4 and 2.25, which means you can actually get out of it in time. The frontal slam is still super fast. The moment you see that slam come up, get out of it immediately. Cancel whatever you're doing. That slam will one-shot you, and it happens very quickly, so be aware of that. They also increased the hatch time on the web terror and increased the cast time on its blast, although you should never see that because you should kill the egg before it spawns, because that's substantially better for your run if that's something you're trying to do. And the web terror now spawns randomly in the room based off of the position of Zekvir's current position. And I emphasize the in the room because the worst thing ever was having that spawn happen at the doorway to where you enter the room, which is down a hallway. And so trying to get line of sight to kill that thing was a pain. And if you were a melee and you had to go into the hallway to kill it, guess who follows you into the hallway? It's Zekvir with all of his AoE abilities that he does and giant frontal slams and everything, where you are now trapped in an incredibly tight enclosed space with this giant monster. So yeah, that is something that was important. I'm glad they fixed that as well. And then yes, they did make Spittle and regenerating Carapace recast times changed on solo to better match each specialization's interrupt cooldowns. That was the change that made me go, hey, I'm going to try this on my Boomy again. Let's see how this goes. And I actually got it down, so that was great. I'm glad to see that change. So I would say for players who are doing 8s currently, give Tier 1 Zekvir a shot. And if you can knock out Tier 1 Zekvir, it's a nice little achievement. It feels good. It is a mechanically heavy fight. definitely take your time with it as far as like mechanics first, like always mechanics first when you're fighting this guy, and throw that damage into that egg every time it appears. But if you can get him down and you don't actually need end of delve rewards very much anymore on certain characters, then you can just kill him 4 times a week. And, you know, that might take you 20 minutes. And then you're done your 4 delves that you might want to do for the week on that character. If that's something you want to do, it is certainly a great way to do it. So definitely glad to see those Zekvir's layer changes as well. Okay, Mythic Plus, they address an issue with Xal'atath's bargain affixes that can target players in unintended situations. Okay, I'm glad that they did that. I don't really know what that referred to, but thank you, I guess.
I don't want to be targeted when it's unintended, so yeah. I'll take it. Yeah.
Yep. They also made it so that the Oblivion bargain, they addressed an issue where the Crystal of Oblivion can sometimes fail to path to its target. I don't really know what that one was either, because they seem to be like homing beacons when it was happening for me. So, yeah.
Yeah, I didn't notice any that, like, I could tell that if you weren't in combat with something that they wouldn't move, but that they would move pretty, you know, determined with some determination at a target that you were in combat with. So maybe this just came in too early for me to have really noticed.
Yeah, it's possible. As far as Grim Batol goes, it got some tuning fixes to make it a bit easier to complete. So that's a great one for folks that were trying to do that. Same thing with Siege of Borealis. We saw huge changes to Siege of Borealis as a keystone to make things have reduced health and make things easier to kill, and extending out some cooldowns on things to make sure that was overall an easier dungeon. It does still need tuning. I have fought it after these changes, and there is definitely still Siege of Borealis tuning that needs to take place.
Yeah, it's one of the harder ones.
It's
I feel like Siege feels better now though than it did in BFA. You know, call me crazy, but I think it's better than it was.
If you could still use the spotters, it would be better than it was. The spotters were amazing.
Not being able to use the spotters to kill the trash for free, that's a little bit of a bummer. But I think the boss reworks are generally an improvement.
I agree. Absolutely. The knockback on the last boss, phenomenal.
Yeah,
great change.
And it's just better than it was in BFA in general because the destroyer tentacles don't respawn.
Yep.
Or whatever they're
Demolishers,
called. That was just that was the case where the harder you did the fight on, the more time it would take, like higher and higher. It would keep stacking on itself because you'd be in combat longer, so more tentacles would spawn, which would make you take more time, and the cycle would just repeat. Now you know exactly what you're dealing with, right where everything's going to be. So I think that's a big upgrade. I love what they did with Eridax in Grim Batol, the last boss, reducing Eridax's visual scale. So the boss just is a little less huge inside the room, and you can kind of see what you're dealing with a bit more. That makes a big difference. And
the orange highlights on all the tentacles. Yeah.
They listed as improve the visibility of void tendrils, but really, they're highlighted in orange, which stands out a lot in that room.
Yeah.
And they have a circle on the floor that's like the unsafe zone around them where they're going to hit you. So that helps a lot.
Yep.
Tremendously in terms of pathing the boss around. Like, of course, I'm responsible for getting the boss into the safe zone, right? So I gotta be able to get him there fast and without running through a bunch of tentacles. So that helps. Yep. And nerfing even the nerf to the debuff that the little ads put out, that's nice too. I mean, I think the way that we found to handle that is to wait for Eridax to finish his big cast and then kill the little ads, just kind of hold them and wait. And that seems to be pretty safe. It's safer anyway. But as we get higher gear with a stacking 3%, it might be possible to just blow them up and deal with it once we get a little bit more item level. So I think good changes to that boss as well. I mean, I do think Grim Batol and Siege are on the more difficult end of the spectrum here for this pool. So Siege has gotten a lot of attention so far since Keystone season started. It's gotten probably the most hotfixes by just, sheer number of bullet points.
Coming out of the gate, it had a bad reputation. So I feel like there is certainly a community-driven attention focus that's been pushed towards Siege. And so I think it's getting a lot more attention than it would have had people not had this incredibly negative connotation the moment the thing came out. So I think
that's a good point.
That definitely helped that.
You can hear the collective groan when we saw the list, for the season 1.
Yeah. Dawnbreaker, they addressed an issue where Rashanan could parry. Well, that's great.
That sounds really bad.
Yeah.
I don't want, back in my day, bosses parrying you was a real legitimate concern.
Yeah.
And
it hit rating.
You wanted expertise, and you had to make sure that none of your melee attackers were in front of the boss.
Yeah.
Because if you drift in front of the boss and you proc a parry, then your tank is going to get lit up with those melee swings. You know, doesn't really work that way anymore. But you still don't want bosses parrying you.
Well, especially a boss that can only face forward and you can only attack his face.
Right. You're not attacking Rashomon in the back, no.
Yeah, just wanted to clarify that on that boss. Yeah, in Dawnbreaker, you can only fight this boss from the front. Even in the raid, you can only fight this boss from the front. So parrying is a bad thing for that boss to be able to do. We also did see some Stonebreaker fixes. As you mentioned, the Master Machinist, the ability timing has been adjusted to prevent a potentially unfair overlap between Exhaust Fence and Blazing Crescendo. They also made it so Molten Metal cast time has been increased by a second, and Silenced Speaker now inflicts damage every 3 seconds as opposed to 1.5. So substantially easier to handle Stone Vault when it comes to those machinists as well, which is great to see. So that's a good change that came in there.
Good changes. I think Stone Vault still needs more help. The trash is gnarly.
Yeah.
Master Machinist is gnarly still. I mean, these changes helped immensely, but it's still not... To me, it's not in line with the rest of the dungeons that we've been doing. Yeah. And Last Boss is also, I think Last Boss is more of a, it's just an overall like rhythm to the fight that people need to learn to establish. But it's challenging. You could be kind of cruising through Stone Vault, even though it's hard. And then you get to third boss and it's like, well, we used to have 17 minutes on this timer and now we have 4. So, it just kind of evaporates. It should be a challenge. It's week 2. We're learning stuff. We're powering up a lot. This is part of the ride that we're taking this season. But I just think the difference is stark and between Stone Vault and most of the rest of the pool. So these changes to Machinists were great, and the fight immediately felt a lot better. But I think it's still not quite there.
Fair enough. Nerebar Palace saw some tuning. Primarily, the majority of tuning we saw was to get the group sizes figured out for a lot of these bosses of which abilities do what when, how many things spawn, how many interrupts you need for different group sizes. So a lot of that tuning went in, which was great. We also saw some mythic nerfs to Ovanax as well as Queen Ansarek, which we know Queen Ansarek went down this past week, so clearly those were needed. And Ovanax clearly needs more attention because teams are still stuck on it. But in general, this was sort of like another pass of raid tuning. A lot of it was bug fixes, but I enjoy seeing group scaling tuning. That's a big part of it for me. One of the bug fixes that came in was for Rashanon again, stating that apparently if you killed him at the wrong moment, he became unkillable and you couldn't defeat him. So that's a problem. If you have a boss who you killed him while he was flying over top of this particular square, which means when he lands, he just never lands, or when he does land, he's unkillable. Like that's just... I don't know. I didn't see the bug, but that is a problem.
The bosses are supposed to be killable. Sometimes it doesn't feel like it, but they're designed to be killed. So if they become unkillable, then that is kind of a catastrophic failure. But they haven't really started hacking away at Nerebar Palace tuning yet, and I don't think that they really need to. We saw some nerfs to specific things. Like Brew Twister did get that heal absorb reduction across the board. The heal absorb is just less than it used to be, no matter what difficulty you're playing. And that felt pretty oppressive when we were looking at it the week before this past week, last week, I guess I mean to say. But, it wasn't like they mutilated the ability. A 12.5% nerf is sizable, but you still have to heal through it. Yeah, it's kind of funny to me to see all the changes to sort of smooth out the small group size experience because I'm used to being way on the other end of this, right?
Yeah.
I'm used to being punished for having the huge group. And in this raid, it's been kind of the opposite. It seems like smaller group sizes had kind of a rocky start. So they were bringing some stuff in the line, which is good. I mean, I would imagine most group sizes are probably on the lower end, right?
Probably,
that 10 to 30 range, and they probably tend more towards the 10 player than the 30 player. So that experience should be smooth wherever if you're going to offer the flex size in that size range. So it's just, to me, like I don't ever remember seeing that at the outset of a tier. It's usually the other way around, and there's fixes to maybe touch something up for larger group sizes or whatever. But I think we'll probably start seeing some more changes in the next week or so here. Like we mentioned at the top, with the race being over, it kind of frees them up to do some bigger tuning sweeps to the raid overall. But we are going to have that stacking buff coming in pretty soon, and I'm wondering if they're going to wait and see on some of the real nitty-gritty tuning to see how people do once they start stacking up that throughput buff.
Yeah.
I think, which could be that maybe that's the way to go. Like maybe that could be good if it's impactful enough. I mean, I think on some level you want to make it more efficient for that like weekly reclear or whatever, and so the stacking buff kind of helps with that. But that's a different story than getting over the hump with a particular boss or whatever, getting stuck on something like that. Probably needs more dedicated attention and more targeted nerfs.
Yeah, if I could pick 2 nerfs for Queen Ansarek right now on Heroic, it would probably be the strength of the yoink could be lessened by 15%, 10%, something like that, so that people aren't being pulled quite as hard towards the boss in all the situations where that happens. And then her intermission shield, I would also reduce by a little bit. Those are probably the 2 things that I would change. But the intermission shield will obviously get easier as your group gets more geared. I just still think it's at a place where having that, you're getting 3 yoinks, you're potentially getting 4, which will wipe your raid, like being on that verge when our average item level in a mythic raid group inside Queen is 622 or something like that. Probably it's overtuned for a heroic boss. I think that they could probably take that shield down a little bit so people are getting yoinked twice, maybe a third time, maybe they're beating the third time. That's probably the healthier spot for that boss to be in. So that'd be my 2 that I'd throw in there for Queen on Heroic that I'd want to see happen. So yeah, boss is still challenging outside of that. I think the upstairs phase is very well done. I think it's probably right in line with where it should be for Heroic boss. I think the transition phases on the platforms are right where they should be for Heroic boss. I do feel like some of the mechanics there are a little bit like you can just get a really bad overlap where like a dude is putting a beam and people are getting pulled and they get pulled into the beam as the beam fires and it kills people like that. That kind of overlap can happen, but that's just a positioning challenge, a mechanical challenge for players. That doesn't bother me as much. I just feel like some of the health total on that shield and the strength of that pull are just a little bit too unforgiving. So I think those two things could get brought down a bit on Heroic. Okay, as far as events go, they did some hotfixes for Brewfest, making sure that people could actually properly refund the Brewfest Bulwark or the Homebrewer's Mantle if that's something that you purchased by accident. Also, well as the barrel tab barrel in Laurel's Crossing now counts towards the trading post activity, in case people were doing that and they weren't getting the activity percentage for that. And the Hallowfall Fishing Derby got some updates. So the derby marks for catching fish while the derby is active are now character specific instead of being shared between your warband. I hate this. I loved this being shared between my warband, but I understand why. Captain oh my goodness, Oathmitz, I guess is what it is. The Hallowfall Fishing Derby quest is now character specific, and is now character specific instead of being shared between your warband, which means you can do the fishing quest multiple times, which is quite nice, and get the rewards multiple times, the full rewards, as opposed to only getting the marks one time and then you do it on somebody else, you don't get the marks anymore. The Hallowfall Fishing Derby's quest now awards 10 marks per completion, and the Derby's quest now give the option of either 2 soaked journal entries, 2 Algari Seeker threads, or 2 Algari Angler threads per completion. This is juicy. So the soaked journal entries are just skill ups towards fishing. So if you want to just move your profession along faster, you can. The Seeker threads are things that you can apply to a fishing pole that has a thread already on it. You have a spool that you have to get tailors to make that you put on your fishing rod. And the threads can then be added to this, which will then increase your perception while you're fishing, so you catch better fish more often. So that is a cool reward that they're doing with adding those threads in there. So I'm quite happy seeing those pop in there for folks. And fish-specific pools such as the Royal Ripple and the Swarm of Slum Sharks will now persist longer when found. These things would go away super fast when people would find them and start fishing them. It was like you might get 1 or 2 pulls out of it before it's gone. So I'm glad that those will now allow people to actually find them and fish them more often, because especially Royal Ripple is a very needed fish for food that people are making. Okay. We also had some player versus player fixes. So if there's someone out there who wants to check out the tuning for what they did to arcane mages under Spellslinger, or what they did to protection paladins, or whatever it is in PvP, you can go and check out the show notes in the link in the show. So you can actually go to the show notes, click that link, head over to the hotfixes and check that out. In professions, we saw some fixes come in as well, primarily towards the patron orders. So all customers except Artisans Consortium will now have a chance to provide basic reagents, which is amazing. I noticed this immediately because I started getting work orders where from patrons that weren't from the other players, that just they had all the ingredients. And it was like, oh, I just get to click craft. This is wonderful. As opposed to, hey, this costs 2 null spheres. Let me go get 10K out of my bank or 14K out of my bank so I can do this one work order. That is not fun. They also increased the likelihood that they lowered the requirement on many potential orders that grant specialization points by 1, which is also really nice because I was definitely getting orders for like, hey, make me this epic staff at tier 5 quality that I'm only providing the spark for. And you're like, you want me to pay 50K in ingredients and use a 400 concentration or 500 concentration to get 1 skill point? No, you're going to sit there for 4 days and not get your order fulfilled. You are a bad customer. I don't want to see you back here again, was basically my response to a lot of those. They addressed several rare cases where customers could request a minimum quality for items without quality. Well, I'm glad they fixed that. They removed several abnormal expensive orders from the pool, such as alchemy cauldrons, engineering toys, and dark mood sigils. All of the above will only apply to newly created orders. Existing ones remain unchanged. So in other words, if you have them currently live, then they're there, which I had. Alchemy cauldrons is one I was getting every single week. I'd get 1 or 2 alchemy cauldrons that they want crafted. I'm like, I can't. I'm not doing it. It's not happening. It's so expensive. There's no way. So I'm glad that they removed some of those. There's still some more I think they could remove, or at least maybe have a higher likelihood that the customer provides the basic reagents on some of these like epic level crafts. I was able to do 3 of them today, which was very nice because there was a lot of skill ups towards my tailoring. So that was really nice on my tailor. But it was definitely something that needed to be looked at. So I'm glad they're looking at it. Professions are getting to a good spot. A hotfix that I have not seen that I would love to see is we've now added to your profession panel the explanation as to what all of the different profession stats do. Because that is something that doesn't exist anywhere. And
yeah, there's not real good UI support for that. Just like we were talking about earlier with the Delvro, that's another opportunity to maybe, you should be able to see. I mean, if you see on your paper doll what your combat stats are, you mouse over them, it tells you how much you have and what it does.
Yep.
Would like that for profession stats as well.
Absolutely. Because the amount of people who are like, I don't know what deafness does. And you're like, well, if you went and looked up online, you may come across a Reddit post where one person explained that deafness helps you gather things faster. And you're like, oh, okay, I now know what deafness does. And then in 2 weeks, you completely forgot what deafness does again. And you have to go try and find that Reddit article again to remember.
You might get really lucky and you might find like a developer post in a PTR or beta forum from Dragonflight or War Within about the stats, that's the holy grail if you stumble across one of those. But yeah, I don't know. It's so important, right? And a lot of stuff you spec into modifies those stats, but they don't call out specifically in the client. Not anywhere I've found. And if anybody knows where this is and we're just ignoring it, please let us know. Yeah, that stuff should be accessible. You should know what you're doing and why you should care about it. That would be great. I mean, sometimes stuff is obvious, right? Like multi-craft. That's a little more obvious because at least it sounds like what it is. And then when it happens, it calls it out that it happened. And, There's a couple examples where there's at least some element that you might come across, but some of it is a lot more obtuse. So that would be nice.
Yeah.
I mean, I've noticed the benefit for these patron order hotfixes immediately. All the ones that came in after this, I've gotten a lot better ones because it seemed like at first they were okay, and then it quickly got to the point where every single patron order wanted super high quality mats or just high level expensive mats. And it's like, I think it's okay to offer some of those, but when that's the whole system, it just feels like you can't interact with it.
Or you're getting offered things that you don't know how to make on a regular basis. I would get 2 or 3 things a week easily, if not more, that were like, here's a really expensive thing that you don't know how to make, and the way to get the recipe is by going and either doing a ton of PvP or spending a lot of gold on the auction house, or going and killing a boss in a raid and getting an RNG drop. And I'm like, whoa.
Yeah, that stuff showing up in patron orders in the first couple weeks that's a pretty high bar. Like, I think it's okay to have stuff that you can't do even like in the list, but it shouldn't be a significant portion of it.
It should be an incentive to go out and do something. Like if the thing that you can't do is, hey, you need to spend 150 of your crafter's resource that you get, your crafter's consortium resource that you get, to buy a recipe off of a renowned vendor or off of, the consortium themselves to do that, whatever it is, enchant or craft that you need to do. That, I think, is a great achievable goal. Because now you go, hey, I have a choice. I can either, spend this 150 towards buying another skill up book or something like that I want to do, or buying more resources from a resource bag that I might want to have that might have a crafting recipe in it that I could actually use and could be really cool. Or I can basically complete this crafting order and learn how to make this thing that I might use on other characters, and I might not have known existed in the first place because I didn't bother looking it up yet. So I think those things to me are neat. So I do, but the threshold of like, oh, here's something that costs either 50,000 gold on the auction house or 7,000 honor. You're like, dude, like, whoa.
Yeah, I get orders all the time from patrons, from NPCs for the PvP blacksmithing stuff, and I haven't PvP'd,
Yeah.
Luckily, a buddy of mine has been PvPing, and he's been getting, I guess, like random drops in the patterns or something and sending them to me. So I learned a couple of them just because I have a good friend who's very nice to me.
Yeah, very nice in general, yeah.
Yeah, like that's it. Otherwise, I wouldn't have them. But yeah, if you like the non-retroactive portion of this should not matter anymore because it's been long enough that all your orders should have cycled out by now. So you should be seeing that benefit if you check your orders of the stuff being a little bit more reasonable, a little bit more achievable, interactable, whatever. And that's how the system should be, right? I think patron orders are filling a great niche that we had in Dragonflight that felt really like glaringly absent, right? Because it was just hard to interface with your profession as much as maybe you wanted to, because there wasn't a critical mass of player initiated orders. It's certainly not enough for everybody, right? Everybody's on the server is competing for the same ones. So this way, it's a way you can check in every day, every few hours, and maybe there's something new to use your profession for. It feels good and it helps you advance that profession as well. So I think it's a great addition to the game and the overall crafting system. But there needs to be a mix of like easy orders you could knock out, and if there's going to be orders that are a higher bar, cool. But if that's your whole pool, then it feels like you kind of feel like the system doesn't even exist, right? There's nothing you can do, so why is it even there?
Yeah, agreed. Okay, Preservation Evokers, your time is coming. As an FYI, your glory of being in the light and being the top healer is slowly being looked at by Blizzard. There's a hotfix coming in tomorrow that will make it so that Consume Flame no longer gains double benefit from versatility. Yeah, that's kind of a broken thing that shouldn't be happening. So yes, that is getting fixed tomorrow. So you will notice a substantial drop. We're talking like in some cases like 5 or 6% healing gone the moment that kicks in, because the double benefit was big. And it also might mean that some of your stats get reoriented a little bit for your character as to what your best stats are, because versatility is going to plummet down that list from where it initially was. It may still remain number one, but it will not be number one by a mile anymore. So just keep that in mind. And they also fixed an issue where Consuming Flame was gaining more benefit than intended from Attune to the Dream. So in general, we should see Preservation Evoker's healing start to drop down the meters a little bit and get a little bit closer to some of the other classes. I am still waiting for the large Resto Druid and Mistweaver Monk pass that is going to be needed. It is very clear that it is needed. It is going to be needed inside raids, especially. And I don't know what they're planning to do about it, but it is there's a dramatic difference in healing between the priest, evoker, paladin, and especially resto shaman that climbs up that tree as well than there is between druid and mistweaver monk. So there needs to be some action taken there for sure for those folks.
Yeah, I mean, I felt that. I play with, a couple, or at least, I play with a couple resto druids, and it's just, it's a bad situation. It's not where it needs to be, for sure. And hopefully, again, we'll see some more robust tuning changes soon with the race being over. Yeah, what was I saying earlier about not all bug fixes are good? And I think that applies here to the preservation changes. Like, if the game's not behaving properly, they're going to fix it, but it does impact players in a negative way. So just be aware that it's happening. It's inevitable, I guess.
And this was clear that they were waiting a while before making this change. Like, they didn't want to come in with this change really quickly when teams were really starting to finalize their healing compositions and what was happening and what characters they're playing, etc. Because this will impact, preservation evokers in a big way. But the current state of the game is, if you don't have 2 preservation evokers, you're not killing Ovanax on Mythic. Period. Like, that was the current state. I was like, that's a problem. Like, you need to fix that. So
the average team's just not going to have that or be able to acquire that on any kind of short-term basis. So that it indicates all kinds of tuning issues, not unsolvable ones, but stuff does need to change when that's the reality of the situation.
Yeah. All right. As far as PTR goes, the 20th anniversary event is getting its Black Rock Depths raid up and running. They'll be testing for it. There was testing for it the past couple of days, and there's going to be more testing on October 3rd and 4th for folks who are looking at hopping in and testing out the Black Rock Depths raid. There's also the Drakthir update is in for players who want to essentially have this. There's a new buff where Drakthir who have strayed away from the evoker magic have reduced movement speed when pressing glide. So that is now in there for a racial update for folks. So that'll be coming up in a few weeks, 3 or 4 weeks. And then the Dark Iron Dwarf now has multiple exits. They've added exits to the Mole Machine for folks, where you can now get Kultiras, Zandalar, Dragonflight, or Shadowlands as other zones the Mole Machine will take you to. So those are great options added in there for that racial for folks as well. When it comes to shamans, there is some more tuning happening here with your Ascendants. They made the model update came in for the new model for that, as well as some glyphs of Ascendants and the glyph of Energetic. So the traditional and energetic Ascendants glyphs are now in as well, which change the appearance of your Ascendants. So if you want to see you play around with the new Shaman look for Ascendants, you can, which is another good thing there as well.
Yeah, so this was, if you remember a couple weeks ago, they put a new Ascendants model on PTR, and it was this sort of Bwansamdi looking type of character with this big wild hair. And we were talking about it on the show, and I thought it looked pretty cool.
Yeah.
I'm not a shaman main. I'm not even a shaman alt. I have a shaman, but she's, I'll get to her when I get to her. The shaman community, I think, did not particularly like this look, which is fine. But the cool thing is, before it even went out, they changed it. So the thing's got like a helmet on, basically, that sort of covers up the wild hairdo. But if you want to glyph it into the more kind of outrageous look, you can do that, or you can glyph it back to the way that it always was. So I love the fact that they did all this before any of it went out. And this is really good. This is a good response to a visual change, right? Like, Ascendance model probably needed a little attention. It's been a while. They wanted to go in a different direction with it. And I think all that stuff is cool and good for the game. You want to keep stuff fresh and touch up things when you get the chance, and maybe even take stuff in a different direction. But that is also going to ruffle players' feathers, dealing with the way a player's character looks like, right?
Yep. That's really important to players. A lot of people have a strong connection to the characters they play, and they want to look a certain way that they think is cool. So this gives you some options, right? You have some customization options for what you want your Ascendance form to look like with this patch. I think it's a great change, really cool, and glad they got it in so early, Yep. I feel like in years past, this might be a thing that players are just kind of stuck with until the next big patch, and, maybe we'll get around to giving you some other option for it, and this time it shows up on PTR a couple weeks later. Exactly. Okay, last but not least, we're going to talk a bit about the October trading post, because that's kicking off, obviously, tomorrow as well. So, First and foremost, at the very top of this post, Jason noticed something a little sneaky that they managed to fit in there, which is mind your tender. Be careful how much tender you're thinking of spending in October, because with the upcoming November trading post, they're going to be bringing back last year's armor sets and transmog weapon sets. Each armor set comes with 3 pieces, the helm, shoulder, and belt, and each weapon set comes with 3 different weapons. And basically that is now going to be available again in November. So be careful what you're spending in October and be saving, because players will now also be able to purchase these items with any class character to add to your transmog collection. And any class that can wear or use that item of transmog can. So if you have a male user, they will be able to wear any male armor set. And if your class can use one-handed maces, you'll be able to use any of the mace transmogs, etc. So Jason used the example when I was chatting with him about this of, hey, if you're a paladin main and you're like, hey, I want to make a Death Knight character, but I kind of want my Death Knight character to be like what happened if my paladin died and came back as a Death Knight, you can choose the same armor look for your Death Knight as you can for your paladin, because there's no class locking between plate, basically, is what they're saying is being lifted. So that is an accessible thing now. And that could be really cool, I think, in a lot of cases for what folks want to get done. So just be careful with your tender for the next month, because if you want to buy some of these sets and you didn't manage to get all of them previously, they're coming back. So just a heads up on that. Little PSA at the top.
Yeah, really cool change to the class restrictions. I mean, they're very class themed, right? Like the paladin gear looks like paladin gear, I think. The monk gear looks like monk gear. So it might look a little weird on a class that it doesn't really quote unquote belong to, but I think it's okay. I mean,
makes sense to me.
It's not something that's tied to some in-game reward, right? It's not like a tier set or something where I could see maybe we want to have restrictions on that stuff for some kind of esoteric reason, a more role-playing reason. This is vendor stuff. It always has been. And if you want to make your character look weird, I think it's okay if they let you. So, some combos might look weird, but I think that's cool. These are also, if you were out for a while earlier in Dragonflight, but you played MOP Remix, these are palette swaps of the ones that were available from that class goods vendor for bronze. So you can collect the whole rest of the set. Not everything really matches up in terms of color schemes necessarily. If you only have one set of them, then the stuff is all kind of mismatched. But if you have both sets, you can match some stuff up pretty nice. So, yeah, I mean, it's going to be it's going to be kind of tough on tender. Having a month heads up is probably good. But if you remember, was it late last year into early this year that they rolled all these out? They were doing like 3 classes at a time per month. Yeah. So you kind of had time. If you have a lot of characters you want to get these on, you're probably not going to have enough tender to get everything.
Yep.
But if it becomes traditional that this sort of comes back annually at the end of the year, then, you can plan ahead, I think. Because when we had these last year, we talked about that. Like, these are really cool, unique rewards, but I hope they're not gone forever. Like, hopefully they come back on a consistent basis. So, just keep that in mind. I mean, again, this is for November. It's September 30th as we're talking now. So this is not the next trading post that's coming out. This is, you have a month to kind of wrap your brain around this and budget your tender accordingly. But I'm glad they gave us a heads up. And I think the changes to the system sound really cool. I think there's stuff that I thought I was going to buy last time that I didn't because of various reasons that maybe I'll go circle back and buy this time. Now that we have the MOP sets, I got everything from Remix, from that. And so now I can flesh out the rest of it maybe if I want to for, certain armor types.
Yeah. Now for us Halloween lovers, this is not good news. I wish they'd told us 3 months ago. But the actual tender for this month, there's a lot of fun rewards coming up in October. There's the Hand of Resh Kigal, which is the hand that is basically that one of those hand mounts you get from like Torghast and from the Maw and things like that. Back in Shadowlands, this one's all sort of silvery bone sort of colored. So if you're looking for one that's a little bit more shiny than the other ones you have, I have the gold one, so it's very shiny. I'm probably going to pass on this mount just because there's so many things that I want. There's also the soot-stained shale wing, which is sort of one of those shale wings. Basically, it's a flying manta ray with a pterodactyl face on it and a scorpion tail. It's an mount that you can get. Those are both going to be available. The big thing for me is the Ragged Harvest Golem ensemble, which to me should have just been the actual monthly reward because it's just so Halloween themed and awesome
that would
looking.
have been nice.
And it would have saved me a bunch of tender because it's going to cost 800 tender to buy the Ragged Harvest Golem ensemble, which I think is an amazing look. We also have the Feathered Bow of the Night, which is a bow that literally looks like a bow handle with someone has cut the wings off an eagle basically and attached them to the top and bottom. It looks very cool. There's the Harvester's Claw, which is a weapon transmog, which literally is that like harvester's metal fingers wrapped in, hay that's been wrapped around with wood tied together claw, which I think is amazing. And any, reasonable melee class that would want something like this, I think is going to be wearing a pretty cool outfit with that Harvest Golem outfit with this.
Kind of a must-have if you're going for the Ragged Harvest Golem ensemble.
Yep, feels like.
That'd be cool, like Windwalker Monk Transmog or something.
Oh, yeah.
With the claws and everything, or a rogue, Even, could be cool mog for, like, a Warlock. It has kind of, evil vibes. Warlock could be cool. And there's a... we don't have a picture of it yet, and it's not October, so we can't go see it.
Yeah.
But there's some like scythes and stuff too that are going to be in this month, so that might be a cool look if you're going for the Harvest Golem ensemble. Definitely the highlight, I think, is from the stuff that we've seen and what we can kind of gather from what they told us is going to be in here. The Harvest Golem ensemble seems to be the big highlight
by far
in the tender realm this time. Yeah.
And then the monthly reward is the Depth Stalker, which, if anyone remembers those jellyfish mounts that people could ride around on, it's essentially like an ethereal jellyfish mount with metal sort of like claws attached to the end of its tentacles that you can get, and that'll be the one that you get for completing your Traveler's Log for the month. And yeah, it's overall, I'm looking forward to this because, like you said, there's a lot of things in here we don't have pictures of yet. Even like the simple ebony wand, I just kind of want to know what some of these wands look like, and I just love creepy, Halloween-y, spooky stuff, and so I always look forward to trading posts when Halloween comes around, which is why I'm like, oh, why did they put the November thing right after the Halloween thing? Tender-wise, I'm going to be so broke.
Because November's anniversary month, and so you got to do it, right? Like, you got to have the anniversary stuff in for November, but then you're right up against Hallow's End with, it's tough. Yeah, I don't know. I'm not crazy about the robot jellyfish mount. It's fine. I'll get it without thinking about it. I'm not mad about it, but I also don't really like it. I'm not going to get mad about whatever they give me for free from the trading post, but it doesn't. It's not something that I'm looking forward to grabbing and using. When they did like the Nether Drake mount over that first summer of Dragonflight, it was so incredible. Like, because not at the time, like not everything could dragon ride, right? It was just the 5 that you got or whatever.
Yeah.
And then they put that in, it was like, oh, that's so cool. Oh man, that actually kind of makes me think differently about what they can offer for these trading post kind of bonus rewards, But not every month is going to be to everybody's taste. I don't really want a new Shadowlands hand mount. Like the one pictured looks cool. It's kind of ghostly looking. But if you never got one in Shadowlands and you kind of like the look, then I guess that's a good option. But nothing that they've shown us. I don't think I'm going to even the Harvest Golem Mog looks super cool, but I don't think I'm buying it because I'm looking at that price tag going, I'm holding back for November, and maybe I'll live to regret it, but I kind of doubt it. No. Like the look doesn't really fit the vibe of the characters that I play, even as cool as it is. So
you always have the option of freezing it and then seeing what's in November and making a determination. There's always that option for folks. So
that's true. I think I might end up doing that. Maybe it'll be a freeze, but I don't think it's a snap purchase.
I hear that. I get that. All right. I want to take a moment to thank our patrons. They contribute a ton to our show and help us to contribute. Well, they contribute a ton of help to our show to create the content that we are making. And today I'm giving a special shout out to Alianas, Arajian, Bradley, Dustin, James, Kapowie, Max, Saucemaster 6000, Shorel, and Rager. Thank you so much for all that you give to contribute to the show and help us to keep the show on the rails and running every week and keep the archives online, all of that. Thank you to all of our patrons who contribute. past and present. If you were someone who used to be a patron, we still appreciate you. You are still someone who has kept this show online and running through the hard times and the good times and everything else. So we appreciate all of you. It's the support has been wonderful, and we love seeing new patrons hop in every week. So a big shout out to our newest patron, Shamster. Thank you so much, Shamster, for hopping in and supporting the show. If you're someone who wants to do so, you can go to patreon.com/thestartingzone and jump on to Patreon to support us there. Or if you're trying to find it later, just go to thestartingzone.com. There's a click button right on the front page that'll take you over to our Patreon. You can hop in there and support the show. Thank you, patrons. You are awesome.
Absolutely. Yes. Thank you, patrons, past and present. The support has been incredible of the show over the years, and it helps us really do what we need to do to get the show done and to deliver the show that you expect and to keep it available to you. And yeah, welcome aboard, Stomster. Stomster's a buddy of mine. If you have ever heard me complaining about Afflicted and Dragonflight and talking about my Resto Shaman buddy with his Poison Cleanse Totem, that's him. Okay. So thanks for hopping in. Thanks for the support, man. Good to have you aboard with us. And thanks for healing them keystones.
Yeah. All right. If you folks enjoyed this episode, another way you can contribute and help us out is head on over to your iTunes, your Apple Podcasts, and leave us a 5-star review. They really help out our show, and we love reading the reviews here live. This one comes in from Steve Machine 17, entitled WoW News and Discussion. If you're looking for World of Warcraft discussion and insight, these guys are great. Well, thank you so much. Short and sweet and perfect. Thank you, Steve. That's helping us out, raising up those charts and helping more people find the show. And I just, we love getting the positivity flowing. So appreciate you.
Absolutely, yes. Thank you, Steve Machine, for writing in. Great to hear from you. Glad you enjoy the show, and hope you're enjoying War Within as much as we are, because it's quite a bit, I would say.
Yes.
Like, man, I mean, just a quick aside on the way out here. Like, I feel like the vibes around the game right now are as strong as they've been and as long as I can remember.
Yeah.
And there's something about, like, apparently there's some sort of, like, 8-year cycle of WoW, I guess. Like, Legion was 8 years from Wrath, and War Within is 8 years from Legion.
We're seeing a new pattern.
I'm not saying that War Within is, like, on that level yet. Time will tell, right? Yeah. But, like, out of the gate, first month plus has been very strong, and you kind of start to see this pattern of, like, yeah, every once in a while they hit these really high highs, and then sort of, there's a bit of diminishing returns, and they try to figure out what the next peak is going to be. But yeah, maybe maybe we're far enough out from Legion, and it's really weird to think that Legion is as far out as Wrath was from Legion when it came out. That's something that I'll have to deal with, but yeah, maybe that's just sort of the ebb and flow of the game, and it reaches some pretty lofty heights, every 8 years or so. Like, we might be in that. I'm kind of feeling it right now. I'm having these. I'm playing extra nights. I'm putting other stuff I want to do aside because I want to get WoW time in, and I'm playing too late, and I'm thinking about what I'm going to do when I wake up the next day, to get into the game and check stuff out. And I mean, not to say that I've never felt that way about other expansions, certainly, but this one it's just delivering in so many different ways. There's so much different. There's so many different ways it succeeds in that it's been remarkable here the first month or so out of the gate.
Yeah, I agree entirely and wholeheartedly with those facts, and just hope that because this is part of a trilogy, they can just carry the same feel through all it. So we get 6 years or 7 years of this. Would be wonderful. Mm-hmm. And then we just have like a little lull for a year, and we're back again at the 8-year roll. That's what I'm hoping.
Right, I mean, you can't maintain that super high level all the time because it's not a science, right? There's scientific elements, there's artistic elements. Yeah. It's alchemy in a way, and sometimes stuff lands better than you expect. Sometimes it lands worse. But, I think a smart thing they did was they really took the Dragonflight formula and didn't rock the boat with it too much. They added on cool stuff and they stuck with what worked. And that was a frustrating thing for me about Legion was I felt like they threw the baby out with the bathwater too much, so to speak.
Oh, agreed.
Yeah, and in the BFA, and I don't think they did that at all with this one. I think all they did was just make the stuff that was good about Dragonflight stronger and
trim back on some of it. Yeah.
I mean, I was listening to Live Laugh Lore a couple weeks ago. My backlog is a little hefty, but I was listening to an episode around sort of pre-expansion time, and Jin was saying that really Dragonflight's The Hobbit and World Soul Saga is the Lord of the Rings trilogy, and Yeah, I think that might be really spot on. You know, if we can just build on what's strong about the game and not try to reinvent the wheel with stuff that you're really hoping players are going to buy into, I mean, I think the game's future is bright.
That's a really good analogy for it. All right, that's going to wrap up 651 of the Starting Zone. If you like to check out show notes for this episode or leave us a comment on the show, you can head on over to thestartingzone.com, the official website for the Starting Zone podcast. If you want to contact the show and leave us your feedback or ask a question, you can email us at thestartingzone@gmail.com or reach out to us on Twitter at The Starting Zone, or you can join our Discord server, thestartingzone.com/Discord. And if you want to get your hands on some TSE gear, you can find that on TeePublic. That's teepublic.com/stores/The Starting Zone, and check out all the sweet designs on shirts and mugs and stickers and that kind of stuff. And we'll have new stuff coming up hopefully in the next couple of months for a lot of that stuff, which will be fun. And Jason, where can folks find you on the internet?
The best place to find me is always over on Twitter. You can find me over there at Shieldwald, and you can also find me on Blue Sky. The username is JLucas over there, so come say hi. And you can also find me streaming WoW, typically Tuesday, Wednesday, Sunday evening, 7:30 Eastern, over on twitch.tv/Shieldwald and youtube.com/Shieldwald. No more free horses, no more pets. All the support a streamer and drops are done, but we'll still be, streaming raid nights and keystones and all that. So come hang out. I mean, the support of the channel was great over the course of those promotions. So thank you to everybody that came and hung out while that was going on and gifted subs and everything. I hope you're all enjoying your horses and your owls. And yes, I haven't really streamed on a regular basis in a long time, and I've been pretty consistent with it since expansion started ramping up. So everybody welcoming me back was super nice. So thank you all for stopping by and for supporting the channels.
Nice. Well, if you're trying to find me online, you can find me on Twitter at Spencer_Downey, or over on Twitch at twitch.tv/SpencerHD. You can also find a YouTube channel, youtube.com/@SpencerHD. And with that, for Jason and myself, we want to say thanks for listening, and jobs done.